Chapter 24-22. The driving mode of a flying car was very different from a car. Whether it was the degree of steering or the excessive speed increase, Meg was not used to it. Fortunately, this car had a trainer mode and anti-collision mode. Even so, she still put on the helmet after getting in the car. "Don't you have basic trust between people?" Meg looked at the helmeted she and said faintly. "Safety is the first principle," she replied calmly. "Then, do you have an extra helmet?" Meg asked. She turned her head and looked at him seriously through the helmet, wondering if she should get out of the car. "I'm kidding. Sit tight, I'm going to drive." Meg grinned and pressed the start button on the steering wheel before stepping on the accelerator. The expected strong push of 1,000 miles per second did not happen. The flying car hurriedly flew forward at 60 kilometers per hour. Meg was confused. "What's wrong with this car?" Meg asked. "To protect the student's safety, the speed limit is 60 kilometers per hour in trainer mode," she replied calmly. "Driving an instructor's car is indeed boring," Meg complained, but he still began to practice seriously. After all, it was his first time driving a flying car and it was very refreshing. Compared to a car, the flying car suspended in the air was more than twice as fun. After familiarizing himself with the car's performance and mastering the steering, climbing, and descending techniques, Meg drove the flying car up and down the magical Beast Mountains at 60 kilometers per hour. He suppressed his breath and teased the magical beasts to chase him. He had a lot of fun. A man's happiness was that simple. She had taken off her helmet and looked at Meg with a complicated gaze. She looked at him as if he was a monster. This guy had only been in the car for an hour and he had already mastered the driving skills of a flying car. When she first learned how to drive, she was scolded by the instructor for half a month before she got her driver's license. 2 hours later, Meg stopped the car above a dense forest. He turned to look at she and asked, "Can you deactivate the coach mode now? Today's lesson is over. You can go back to language learning now," she said expressionlessly. "Can I drive this car away?" Meg asked tentatively. "This is my personal car." Meg smiled awkwardly. That was right. She did not look like the kind of woman who would drive a pink kitten car. This kind of wild car was more in line with her temperament as a ruthless sniper. "Then send me to the city gate first." Meg started the car and drove toward Chaos City. The flying car stopped silently outside the city gates. Meg jumped out of the car and watched the flying car fly away, the corners of his mouth curling up slightly. Multifunction bracelet, flying car. He felt as if he had transmigrated from the world of magic to a world of steampunk. He was looking forward to the upcoming trip to the underground city. Back at the dining room, Meg went to the study after a quick wash-up. He turned on his bracelet, received the language course package from she, and started studying. The language and writing system of the underground city was completely different from that of the Norland continent. However, she sent him a language and literacy curriculum for young children. Other than the overly brainwashing nursery rhymes, it was easy to understand. 2 hours later, Meg quietly closed the cartoon literacy video. He opened the window and began to wonder why he, a demigod with a memory genius, was reading nursery rhymes and learning to read here. "Can you send me some videos for adults?" Meg turned on his bracelet and sent a message to she. 10 minutes later, Meg received a reply. "I don't watch those kinds of videos." Meg. Throughout the night, Meg had a preliminary understanding of the underground city language and writing that the young contestants needed to master through the children's literacy video. Meg felt that when he went to she's place to learn a foreign language today, it was necessary to explain the message he sent last night and ask she to give him a copy of the adult language learning materials. Looks like he should be able to adapt to life in the underground city very quickly. In the office, Ferdinand deleted Chi's report and continued to browse the morning papers. When his gaze fell on missing Councilman Tam case, he paused and clicked on the latest development. At present, the murderer has not been found, and no organization has admitted to planning this. However, it can be confirmed that Councilman Tam is not dead. Criminal charges. Ferdinand looked at the photo in the report. In the photo was a tall and thin middle-aged man wearing rimless glasses. He was bending over to enter the flying car. This was the last scene before Councilman Tam disappeared. Ferdinand had a good impression of this civilian councilman. The two had also met informally a few times and reached an agreement on many ideas, including weakening the privileges of the plutocrats. Due to the vicious incident that had happened previously, Ferdinand had specially strengthened Councilman Tam's security. However, he still disappeared on the way to the parliament. The robbers were very professional. Other than the bodies of the security personnel, there was no valuable evidence left at the scene. This matter had caused a great commotion on the internet. Councilman Tam had always been a supporter of the civilians and was deeply loved by them. After the disappearance case, there had been many demonstrations in various states. Kidnapping a councilman on the streets of Tucker City was an extremely arrogant move. Ferdinand knew very well that this matter must be related to the bill that Tam was going to propose in this parliament. Before he left, Tam sent him a message saying that he was prepared to be assassinated after he walked out of the parliament building. However, no one had expected that he would be kidnapped before he could even reach the parliament. Councilman Tam better be fine, or else. Ferdinand looked at the words, McCarthy family, that he had marked in red with a cold gaze. This was the 8th disappearance of a celebrity in the past year. Councilman Tam was not the first, and he would not be the last. During the driving lesson at night, Meg brought Chi a plate of braised pork. Once the instructor was satisfied with the driving lesson, she would not be far from completing her apprenticeship. Looking at Chi, who was eating with her head lowered, Meg also took a small stool and sat opposite her. He said, I sent you a message yesterday. Don't misunderstand. She paused. When she thought of the message Meg sent her late last night, a trace of embarrassment flashed in her eyes. However, her expression was still cold as she said, I told you, I don't look at that kind of thing. I told you it's not that kind of thing. Meg felt that the more he said, the worse it got. This girl looks quite normal, but what's going on in her head? What I'm saying is that it's a learning video for adults. If you send me some literacy nursery rhymes, I'm going to explode from listening to it. Meg looked at Chi sincerely and said. Chi's chewing movement froze. Looking at Meg's righteous face, she blushed, which was rare. Oh my God. The videos he mentioned for adults are actually serious learning videos. Chapter 24-23. Meg did not feel awkward now. So, she was the one who felt awkward. The air was quiet and even the wind in the mountains was not as noisy as it used to be. After a minute of silence, she finally swallowed the rice and meat in her mouth. She coughed and said, You're a beginner. These are suitable learning materials for you at this stage. Don't bite off more than you can chew. I think I can move on to the next stage of learning now. Meg spoke in the Dungeon Mandarin. You've only just started. She stopped abruptly, and her eyes widened even more as she looked at Mag. Yes, he had just spoken in the Dungeon Mandarin. Although his pronunciation was a little clumsy and childish, but it was the authentic Dungeon Mandarin and very accurate. I told you, I'm very talented in learning languages. Meg spread his hands and still spoke in the Dungeon Mandarin. She had to admit that she fell for his act this time. There's no need for specialized learning materials. Just help me unlock the movie library in the bracelet. I'll watch and learn on my own. Meg made a request. How do you know there's a movie library in the dungeon? She looked at Meg and asked. Speaking of which, you might not know. I've been preparing to shoot a magic movie recently and hired she to be the scriptwriter. The dungeon is so much more advanced than the Norland continent. There should be many operas and movies like Miss Black Cat, right? Isn't there one? Meg said matter-of-factly. She had to admit that Meg's answer made sense. Okay, I'll unlock the access when we get back tonight. She nodded. Anyway, Meg would enter the dungeon soon. When the bracelet's functions were fully activated, he would be able to browse everything on the internet. With yesterday's foundation, Meg finally got She's permission to unlock the coach mode and switch to normal mode after a few rounds of trial driving. Wait, let me out first. She looked at Meg, who was holding the steering wheel eagerly. Meg glanced at her. Haven't you already experienced my driving skills? That's why I want to get out. She unbuckled her seatbelt and got out of the car without any hesitation. Meg. Isn't there a collision avoidance mode? Is it necessary for this girl to do that? Meg mumbled as he closed the car door. His hands that were holding the steering wheel still felt a little warm. He took a deep breath and stepped on the accelerator. She stood at the top of the mountain and watched as a spot of light flew across the sky and bounced between the peaks, almost forming a line of light. 10 minutes later, the flying car stopped at the mountain peak. The car door opened and Meg jumped out. He looked at Shishi calmly and was about to say something when he suddenly turned his head to support himself against a tree. This was the first time that Meg threw up after learning how to drive. How should I put it? The car's acceleration was too wild, the night was too dark, and the anti-collision function was too sensitive. Since the first time he was about to hit a mountain, he could no longer turn the steering wheel. Therefore, he was flung back and forth between more than a dozen mountain peaks, and he successfully threw himself up. Do you still want to learn how to drive? She smiled gloatingly. The path to Cheoming Mountain was bound to be full of twists and turns. I ate too much at night. Let's start over. Meg jumped into the car indignantly and stepped on the accelerator lightly. The car rose to an altitude of 2,000 meters. There were only a few mountain peaks in sight before he stepped on the accelerator with ease. Meg enjoyed the thrill of driving, but he did not indulge in it. Learning how to drive also had the intention of learning a life-saving skill. The speed of She's flying car was far beyond the speed of a level 10 powerhouse. And in a city chase, it could play an even greater role. The more he understood the underground world, the more cautious he was. Although that world was not full of extraordinaries, he believed in the principle that more skills would not be a burden. Meg drove the flying car to the Demon Islands and became a flying car bandit, ransacking the Abyss Demon Tribe's treasury. By the time the Abyss Demon Tribe's internal alarm sounded, Meg had already driven away and they did not even see the tail lights. You learned how to drive for this. She looked at Meg, who got out of the car happily. She had just seen what Meg had done through the car's surveillance camera. I've always been a person who clearly distinguishes between kindness and hatred. The Abyss Demon Tribe has a grudge against me, so this is their payment for their lives, Meg said matter-of-factly. Unfortunately, after the Abyss Demon Tribe was ransacked by him and Irina many times, there were not many good things left in their treasury. After conversion, there was only 600 million, which had just been transferred to the system. She did not refute Meg's words. She had studied Meg's information and knew that the Abyss Demon Tribe did have a death feud with him. However, a few months ago, the Abyss Demon Tribe's Patriarch and the Flaming Demon Tribe's Patriarch fought to the death for some reason. The two tribes fought because of this and suffered heavy losses. She did not believe that Meg did not add fuel to the fire. I've already learned how to drive. What do you want to learn tomorrow? Meg asked. Guns. I'm 800 miles away now, and I can kill a Japanese with one shot, Meg said. She frowned. She did not understand what Meg was talking about. What I mean is that I've already trained my sniper rifle pretty well. Do I still need to practice my guns? Meg said seriously. A sniper rifle is just one type of gun. As a qualified agent, mastering the basics of guns is a compulsory course. She brought Meg onto the battleship and opened the door to her armory. All kinds of guns of different lengths and thicknesses hung on the 3 walls. They glowed with an exciting metallic luster. Meg was silent for a while. He looked at she and said seriously, "You know how to make a man excited." She pondered over the meaning of Meg's words. She was trying to figure out if he meant it literally or if there was another literal meaning. Fuck, this is fucking awesome. Meg had already walked into the armory. He touched the short gun and played with the long gun. He even hugged the giant machine gun that looked like an enhanced version of the Gatling gun. He asked she, "Does this thing emit blue flames?" She was sure that Meg meant what he said. She shook her head and said, "There will be red flames when you fire." "Okay, coach. Where should we start?" Meg asked humbly. "Start with the short gun." She started to go into teaching mode. Meg had to admit that she was a woman with a special charm. Especially when she was holding a gun. Whether it was a delicate short gun or a heavy machine gun with red flames, they all looked very harmonious in her hands. Meg did not doubt the damage these weapons could cause when they were in she's hands. The weapons in the underground city were not something that could be imagined on the Norland continent. Not to mention she's sniper rifle that could take the enemy's head from dozens of miles away. Even those short guns had shocking explosive power at close range. Chapter 24-24. Late at night, Meg returned to the cafeteria. The feeling of a blazing Gatling gun sweeping down a mountain made one's blood boil. After washing up, Meg lay on the bed and activated the projection function of the bracelet. He projected the images onto the ceiling and opened the movie library. Meg skipped the option of 18 movies and opened the movie rankings. He browsed through the movies on the rankings quickly. The movies in the dungeon were about 3 hours long. To Meg, who was used to watching movies that ranged from 90 to 120 minutes, this length was too long. 70% of the movies on the movie rankings were romance movies. From the summary, most of the movies were tragic dramas. The more tragic the plot, the higher the rating. Are the dungeon residents' lives so miserable? Meg stroked his chin and clicked on the movie that was ranked number 1, Desperate Love, with a puzzled heart. 3 hours later, Meg finished watching this movie. It was about 2 young people who fell in love with each other in the midst of war. After going through the hardships of war, they finally welcomed the dawn of peace. However, the female lead was terminally ill, and the male lead refused to leave her. Meg went to relieve his bladder. Then, he sat in front of the computer and wrote a short movie review. It's quite touching, but I hope the director's movie will not be as smelly and long as an old lady's foot binding cloth. After 3 hours, my bladder will explode. The story was well told, and the actors' acting skills were on point. They were incomparable to the young actors from China Entertainment on Earth. However, the scriptwriter and director's standards could be improved. There was more than an hour of filler content. Removing it would not affect the plot. Instead, it would enhance the movie experience. With a learning attitude, he opened the second movie. The movies that Meg chose were all modern movies, and most of them were movies that were more realistic. A movie was a part of life. This was a reality that the dry descriptions of chronicles could not compare. Meg observed the lives of the dungeon residents from the movies and studied their anxieties and hobbies. Interestingly, animation was an important part of the movie industry in the dungeon. It even accounted for 30% of the movie rankings. In one night, Meg watched 2 movies and an animation movie. He wrote 3 reviews that were slightly vicious. It was really just a slightly poisonous tongue. Meg thought that he had already restrained his soul of ridicule. Host, please be at ease. Without the additional fame of being the son of the richest man in the world, you won't be cursed to another world just because of a few comments. The system consoled him. Meg immediately felt relieved. It seemed that he could be more open in the future. System, how's the construction of the mecha coming along? Meg asked. I'm building it, the system replied cheerfully. Why do you look so happy? Did you set me up? Meg furrowed his brows. As the god of cookery cultivation system, this system serves the host across specializations. My hair has turned white from worry, and I've worked hard for whoever I've worked hard for. How could the host doubt me like this? This really makes the system disappointed. The system was filled with righteous indignation, as if it was a little wife who had been bullied. Meg was also unable to judge the difficulty of creating this mecha. However, this was after all a mecha that even Ferdinand valued highly. It should not be that easy to replicate it, so he did not delve too deeply into it. Alright. I'll make up the remaining 4 billion yuan tomorrow. Hurry up and get the production line ready for me. Meg was too lazy to be long-winded with the system. He turned off the bracelet, lay in bed for a short nap, and got up to cook. For the next week, Meg led a regular life every day. During the day, he worked at the restaurant, occasionally went to school to teach the children, and at night, he would look for She to learn various skills. After that, he would stay up all night watching movies and learning foreign languages. His life was extraordinarily fulfilling. Congratulations on passing the Level 8 Common Language test. Meg looked at the fireworks on the screen with a smile on his face. He took a screenshot and sent it to She before sending a message. Level 8 is just a so-so. After a few minutes of silence, the other side replied with a sentence. You will be arranged to enter the underground city tomorrow. Please be prepared. So soon. This time, it was Meg's turn to be surprised. Last night, he was still learning how to drive a special machine with She and did not mention anything about going to the underground city tomorrow. This is your new identity. Memorize all the information. After entering the underground city, mission mode will be activated directly. She sent him a set of information. After Meg accepted it, he clicked on an identity resume. Hades Saipan, both parents dead. Good lord, Meg thought that she might have a Cheetian account number. Moreover, she was quite attentive and even knew that his previous name was Hades. However, using Saipan as a surname made him feel weird. If someone were to yell his name in the future, he really did not know how to answer. He continued reading. This Hades Saipan was an unknown folk cooking enthusiast with amazing cooking talent and a cooking philosophy that was completely different from the mainstream. This was the new identity that Ferdinand had set for him. The chef aspect was considered to be a combination of his specialties. However, since he was already in another world, why would they give him the identity of a chef? He continued reading and finally saw a photo. Hey handsome, who are you? Meg looked at the handsome young man in the photo and touched his mustache that was ridiculed. This was a photo of Hades Saipan. Apparently, the other party thought that he could solve the problem of his appearance. Indeed, Meg could solve it. He took out the transformational mask and used his mind to create a face in the photo before putting it on his head. So, it's you. Meg looked at the handsome man in the mirror and nodded with satisfaction. He had well-defined facial features, a handsome face, deep brown eyes, and thick, dark brown hair. He was handsome and masculine at the same time. Why does a chef have to be so handsome? Is there a plot where he sells his looks? Meg scrutinized his face in the mirror. Although he didn't mind being a little handsome, being too handsome would sometimes become a problem. After the dinner service, Meg asked everyone to stay for dinner. "I'm going out tomorrow. The restaurant will be closed for 5 days. Treat it as a short holiday for everyone," Meg announced at the table. "Boss, are you going out to gather ingredients again?" Mia asked curiously. The others also looked at Meg. A 5-day-long holiday was very rare at Amy's. "Yes, I've been lacking inspiration recently, so I plan to go out alone and see if I can get some new inspiration to make new dishes." Meg nodded with a smile. What a legitimate reason. "Alone? Father, are you sure you don't want to bring the cute Meg with you?" Amy asked as she blinked and looked at Meg. End of chapter. Chapter 24-25. Not this time. Father plans to go out alone. "Amy, you have to listen to your mother at home." Meg shook his head with a smile. He had to go to the underground city alone this time. "All right." Amy was a little unhappy, but she still nodded obediently. "Seems like we will be able to eat the new delicacies again when Boss comes back," Mia said expectantly. The girls had similar expressions. Every time Boss went out to collect ingredients, he would always come back with something new for everyone. Going out alone. Is Boss going to save the world again? Shirley secretly sized up Meg. She recalled that every time Boss went out mysteriously, something big would happen on the Norland continent. Why did he leave this time? Father, you have to bring good food for little Guai when you come back," little Guai instructed seriously as she held a beggar's chicken drumstick in her hand. "Okay, I will bring good food for all of you." Meg nodded with a smile. Yeah. Little Yai called out twice, afraid that she would miss out on her share. After the small gathering, the girls returned to the dormitory. Meg went to tell the girls bedtime stories as usual. "What do you want to hear today?" Meg asked the 3 little fellows sitting in a row on the bed. Gina stood at the side, and Phyllis sat by the bed with Yai in her arms. As Meg's stories were too interesting, the bedtime stories that were originally used to coax the children to sleep became storytelling. The audience also grew from children to adults. Irina would also join in the fun in the past, but she didn't come today. "Neza," the 3 children said in unison. "Father, you mentioned the Dragon Kings of the 4 Seas flooding Enchanting Pass last time. What's next?" Amy asked. "Neza will beat them to death, right?" Little Guai asked with a serious face. And had already taken out her little notebook, and seemed to be preparing to take notes. Meg didn't beat around the bush. He continued telling the story of Neza causing havoc in the sea. "Let's talk about how the Dragon King of the 4 Seas summoned the wind and rain and flooded Enchanting Pass, due to the fact that most of the Western fairy tales were not nutritious and had a high repetition rate. Meg had recently begun to change his style and began to tell China's classical fairy tales to children. He had thought that there would be a cultural clash and they would lose interest. Unexpectedly, not only did the little ones enjoy it, even Phyllis and Gina were engrossed in it. And Meg's emotional acting made the story even more interesting. When they heard that Neza had cut his flesh to return to his father and save Enchanting Pass, the girls could not help but wipe their tears. Alright, that's all for today's bedtime story. If you want to know what will happen in the future, please listen to the next episode. Meg snapped his fingers and pulled everyone out of their emotions. After Hades entered the dungeon, he would go to Tucker City to participate in the Chef King competition. The competition was already in the top 8. Today, there would be contestants withdrawing due to physical reasons. The program team would announce that Hades would enter the top 8 as a special contestant. Meg watched with great interest. This plan was quite interesting. According to them, He was going to the dungeon to participate in a variety show called a Chef King competition. This variety show was sponsored and broadcasted exclusively by the McCarthy family's Mocha Group. The real purpose of the show was to select a family chef for the McCarthy family. Meg needed to participate as a folk expert and compete with famous chefs in the dungeon. He needed to win the competition and enter the McCarthy family. The plan ended here. The plan after entering the McCarthy family had not appeared yet. Or did it not exist at all? What an impeccable plan. Did they even think that he would win the competition? Meg himself was not that confident. Is there a problem? She came back after breakfast. Her mouth was slightly swollen because she was scalded by the soup hidden in the bun. You have so much confidence in me. Meg laughed. We have people on the judging panel, she said calmly. Oh, sorry to bother you. Meg shook his head and sighed. Public morals were degenerating day by day. Even the competition was fake. End of chapter. Chapter 24-26. Aren't you going to ask what a reality variety show is? Seeing that Meg was silent, she could not sit still. Isn't it just a group of actors acting out an awkward reality show? Meg said casually. She was speechless. Meg's summary was so accurate that she did not know how to refute and complain. How did you know? She frowned slightly, feeling that she had found a blind spot. Didn't you help me open the film library? There are variety show segments in it, Meg said matter-of-factly. She said faintly, you've mastered it quite well. You know, I'm very talented in machinery. Meg smiled. Although he had changed his face, she still felt that Meg was asking for a beating. What about after I enter the McCarthy family? What's the follow-up plan? Meg asked. If there's a plan, give it to me quickly. I don't like the feeling of being led by the nose. Plans can never keep up with changes. I haven't received a follow-up plan, but based on past experience, no follow-up means no plan. You need to improvise, make your own plan, and complete the mission, she said. Understood. Meg nodded. This was more in line with his style. I need more information about the McCarthy family and Senator Tam. You only gave me 2 names. I don't have time to slowly investigate by myself. The detailed information will be packaged and sent to you soon. All the functions of your bracelet have been opened, including the internet connection. You can go and learn about the Master Chef competition first. If you can't win and enter the McCarthy family, this mission will fail by default, she said. Meg tapped on the bracelet and the system showed that the update was completed. At the same time, some of the originally gray interfaces and functions were all lit up. After all, Meg was someone who had experienced the internet era. He would not make a fuss about surfing the internet. Moreover, there might not be as many talents on the internet as there were on Earth. After all, people in the underground city had to cultivate for no reason. However, it was different on Earth. There were plenty of people who had nothing to do, such as you. Just as Mag was about to ask where she was going to watch the variety show, a notification popped up. Explode. The top 8 of the Master Chef competition is about to begin. Popular contestant Jasper Flagg had regretfully withdrawn from the competition due to physical discomfort. Mystery guest joining us urgently? The mysterious guest, Meg Benbin, clicked on the message. According to the report, the most popular contestant in the competition, Jasper Flagg, had suffered an unexpected injury last night and was unable to continue participating in the competition. In order not to affect the progress of the competition, the program team had urgently invited a mystery guest to save the day. As for this mysterious guest, the production team had yet to reveal any more information about him. There wasn't even a photo of him. The report was very short, but it made it to the top of the hot search list. Micro Push was the most popular entertainment software in the dungeon. It integrated news, entertainment, short videos, games, etc. Its functions were not much different from Weibo. The biggest difference was the number of users. It was said to be 18 billion. 80% of the residents of the underground city had microblogging accounts. So, how did a chef who withdrew from the competition become the #1 topic on the hot search list? The Master Chef competition has been held for 4 episodes. This is the 5th episode. The production team can come up with new tricks every season. They turned a chef competition into the most popular variety show on the internet. It said that the exclusive broadcasting rights for this season were sold for 1 billion. She seemed to have seen through Meg's doubts and explained. Meg exclaimed, "Good guy. This was the era of chefs becoming gods. System, why don't we become gods here?" Meg said in his heart. According to research from various worlds, the higher the level of technological civilization, the lower the willingness of residents to cook on their own. The dungeon world has entered the era of robot butler cooking. There is no longer the basic requirement to become gods. The system replied. Moreover, the audience may not like this show because of the cooking. Last season, the 2 most popular chefs came out of the closet. The final was a love-hate relationship between them. She revealed another piece of news. Meg was speechless. This director is indeed a genius. Meg looked at the replies under this message, and all of them were of different opinions. My heart goes out to Gigi. I hope brother can get better soon. True fans will always be with you. Who heard Big Brother? I've already taken out my 250-meter broadsword. Who is the mystery man? What right does he have to replace brother? I want to be an anti-fan. Meg turned to look at She. This guy is so popular. Why did they choose him? Is this also the director's plan? He had already seen the photo of brother Jasper. He had an oval face, peach blossom eyes, and pink skin like a girl. Of course, this should be more in line with the beauty standards of young girls. The way they called him brother was very affectionate. If he were to replace this guy, he would probably have to bear a lot of fire from his die-hard fans. The director isn't one of us. Moreover, he can't bear to let go of this traffic. He even arranged a couple for him. She shook her head. So he's eliminating a strong opponent for me? Meg asked again. His culinary skills are terrible. He only made it to the top 8 by relying on the show's script. According to the show's plan, he'll stop at the top 4 and then make his debut, she said. There's such a thing. Meg was confused. Isn't this a variety show for chefs? How did he make his debut? Wait, so why did they choose him? Meg felt that it was too roundabout. Because compared to the other contestants, he has a very fatal flaw. Meg did not answer and chose to listen. He likes to take his sisters to a hotel, she said. Oh, fanboy. Meg said in disdain. As a VIP with tens of millions of fans in his previous life, he had never done such a thing, so he despised this behavior. She felt that Meg's description was quite accurate, so she continued, he didn't stop this hobby during the competition, so we arranged for a young lady to ask him out, and also let the young lady's brother arrive on time. You guys are baiting him. Meg wanted to laugh but held it in. He could already imagine the tragic scene. Then, Meg quickly saw another trending topic on the list, inside story of Jasper Flagg's injury. There was an anonymous leak in the trending topic. It was said that Jasper Flagg was beaten to the hospital by the girl's family for asking an underage girl out. It was immediately forwarded by various entertainment VIPs. Soon, the live video was on the top of the trending topic. Jasper Flag's image collapsed. The Chef King competition program team made an emergency announcement. The contestants' behavior has nothing to do with the program team. Then, the program team announced the mystery guest, Hades Saipan, folk chef enthusiast. There was a handsome photo attached and his account was tagged. Chapter 24-27. Meg ate melons all the way and experienced the long-lost thrill of surfing. As one of the melons in the melon field, he did not have the slightest awareness of being a melon and even liked the post. Then, Hades Saipan, like Jasper Flag, was beaten up, also made it to the end of the trending list. Relying on this wave of popularity, Meg's newly registered account already had more than 1 million fans. Of course, compared to the popularity of Jasper Flag's 30 million fans, it was still a far cry. Is this the software with 18 billion users? It's terrifying. Meg looked at the rapidly increasing number of fans and glanced at the 9,999 plus private messages. Half of them were abuse from Jasper Flag's diehard fans. Meg filtered the keywords and then blocked them with a click. Primary school students only had a few words of abuse back and forth, so it was very easy to distinguish them. The other half were talents. This is a handsome guy. Thick eyebrows, big eyes, bright and handsome. Isn't he 100 times better than that girl? Brother, I love you. Wanna go out? Plus sister, handsome, I have 2 buildings in the central area of Tucker City. Are you interested in having dinner tonight? What's the standard of 2 buildings in the central area of Tucker City? Meg turned his head and asked she. The current housing price in the central area is 800,000 / she replied. Meg roughly calculated in his mind and replied, I'm not that kind of worldly person. That's a pity. The rich woman quickly replied to him with a picture of having breakfast. Through the floor-to-ceiling window, a long river could be seen in the distance. Meg first searched the picture and confirmed that it was not a web map. Then, he found the river in the central area of Tucker City and determined the approximate area of the shooting room based on the angle of the photo. Tucker City CBD. The Twin Towers. According to the information on the internet, the Twin Towers belonged to the Dixon family, which was one of the top 10 families along with the McCarthy family. If there's a chance, I can cook for you personally. Meg replied with another message. Hee, interesting. The other side replied with a message and did not follow up. Hee, disgusting. She rolled her eyes at him. How can you peek at other people's messages? Meg glanced at her. Do you think people of their status would send you such messages? She asked. What if? Meg asked. You have a wife and children, she reminded him. I'm making preparations to complete the mission. Do you think I want to live off you? Meg was amused by she's serious look. Instead of answering, she said, the Chef King competition is divided into online popularity and live judges' scores. The contestants have been competing for a month and have accumulated a lot of popularity. Now that you're in the top 8, you're at a huge disadvantage starting from 0 online popularity. You're still playing the idle trainee trick in such a professional competition? Meg was shocked. Just now, he was so engrossed in watching that he forgot to look at the rules of the competition. Moreover, this was too outrageous. What did being good-looking have to do with cooking? Wasn't this program team too unprofessional? Do you think a lot of people would like to see a group of pot-bellied chefs cooking together? She asked. Meg was speechless. Starting from the preliminary round, the contestants will be selected according to the ratio of well-known chefs and folk experts. The professional chef team will be responsible for the professional aspect, while the trainees from various entertainment companies will be responsible for the appearance and the topic. The program team will gain the topic, and the trainees will gain popularity. It's a win-win situation. Meg could not help but sigh. There was no cooking competition in his previous life. There was a reason why it was so popular. It was because this director knew how to play. According to the competition rules, the weight ratio between the professional judges and online popularity was 8:2 in the final score. Don't underestimate this 20% weight ratio. If the live score was similar, this 20% popularity would be the deciding factor. For example, Meg's almost zero popularity was equivalent to adding 20 points to the contestant's full popularity. How could he compete? How long will this competition last? Meg asked. According to tradition, the top 8, semi-finals, and finals will be held consecutively. The champion will be decided in 3 days. Meg was confused. This was different from the variety shows he remembered that would drag on for a year. How could such a popular competition be finished in 3 days? Then how can I get the popularity of the contestants who have been with them for more than a month in just 3 days? Meg looked at she seriously and asked. She was silent for a while before saying, I'll try my best to help you. Meg sized she up and asked sincerely, have you been in the food industry? She was puzzled. Do you know how to post such things? Meg randomly opened the front page of a celebrity's account and pointed to the mushy comments at the top of the rankings. She stared at the screen with a solemn expression for a while before shaking her head. Meg sighed and fell into deep thought. Although he was confident in his culinary skills, this was a variety show and not a proper cooking competition. He was certain that there would not be a big gap in the competition's ratings. At the very least, it was impossible for him to pull ahead of the contestant in second place by 20 points. Therefore, he had to make up for it in terms of popularity. Even if he did not get first place, he had to at least get to the average. As long as the contestant in first place could not pull ahead of him in terms of popularity, he was confident that he could win the competition. As a celebrity in his previous life, he had done some research on gaining fans. The ordinary popularity type of fan growth was slower, but there would be an explosive period after gaining traffic. For example, a celebrity would gain fans quickly during a popular drama. Meg was now at the center of a huge traffic pool, but he did not have any works. He did not even have anything to talk about other than a slip of the hand. He only relied on a photo to gain some fans. 3 days was too short and this method was too slow. He was familiar with this method of gaining fans through blackmail. Back then, he gained popularity on Weibo by gaining a lot of hate points. Then, he got himself kicked out. However, this method was not easy to replicate. After all, he did not have the support of being the son of the richest man. Who knew if he would be banned if he said a few more words? Time is limited. I need to use a special method to gain fans, Meg said. What method? She asked. A blacklist of A-list celebrities in the entertainment industry. To create a god, I have to pull some rotten guys down from the altar, Meg said. Although she did not know about Meg's plan, she quickly sent a blacklist to Meg. The so-called celebrities were just canaries and spokespersons reared by the tycoons. Their secrets were a joke at a certain level. End of chapter. Chapter 24-28. Meg looked at the list and frowned deeply. This was really a stinky industry. Those celebrities with extremely beautiful resumes, who were sanctimonious and kind to the outside world, were doing dirty and despicable things behind the scenes. Rape, murder, imprisonment. At this moment, these people were still active in that circle and were respectfully addressed as teachers. Meg had just arrived in the underground city and was not so righteous that he wanted to save the people of the underground city. He carefully sifted through them and selected a few names. Then, he searched online and began to post on Weibo. Meg's first target was a director by the name of Horace. This was a director who had won all types of awards, and during his 300-plus years in the film industry, he had directed over 200 movies, which was an extremely prolific production. In the introduction of the person in the tweet, he was a respected director, a shining star in the history of film, a monument. And it was this respected director who, in his more than 300 years of directing career, sexually assaulted more than 300 young actors. More than 10 of them committed suicide out of shame and anger, and the victims had no recourse. These deeds were not popular on the internet, and only a few words could be found. Horace was still active in the film and television industry. Recently, he had received a billion-yuan investment and was filming a large-scale war film. There was also a related news on the trending list. Meg did not pity the actors who used their bodies in exchange for opportunities. It was just that almost half of the victims were extras and interns. They had not even officially stepped into the industry and were ruined by Horace. The victims who committed suicide were basically from this group. They were weak and had no recourse. Even their voices on the internet had been completely deleted. Standing behind Horace was the Dixon family. Yes, it was the family of the rich woman who sat in the Twin Towers building and asked him out for a meal. Meg forwarded a suicide tweet sent by a victim with only 3 views. After sending this tweet, she chose to commit suicide by jumping off a building. In the post, she recounted how, as an extra, she had been sexually assaulted by Horace and the 2 main actors during the filming of the movie. But no one saw this tweet. There were only 3 views. This was the tweet that she found for him. Horace, justice may be late, but it is never absent. After sending the tweet, she turned to look at she. I need to make sure that this tweet won't be deleted or restricted. She thought for a moment and nodded. It can be done. Meg's Weibo post was followed by many comments. Fuck. Is this true? I grew up watching Horace's movies. My grandfather grew up watching Horace's movies. He has won almost every award in the film industry. Why would he do something like this? I feel like a squid in a melon field, jumping up and down. Is this newcomer crazy for attention? With director Hua's reputation, he can easily ban him. Charlie was my childhood idol. You don't have to do that, do you? I'm waiting for a rumor to be refuted, or a solid piece of evidence. Jasper's incident put Meg's account at the center of a whirlpool. After the incident, the tweet that he forwarded by Horace also caused a whirlwind on the Weibo. It made it to the trending list and started to climb rapidly. Hades accuses Horace of sexual assault of underage girl. Charlie, Bart suspected of being involved in sexual assault with Horace. Many topics made it to the top. The Weibo team reacted quickly. They reduced the popularity, closed the comments, and hid the keywords in an attempt to suppress the matter. Meg looked at the trending list that was dropping rapidly. There was only one related topic left on the list, which showed the power of the other party. He turned to look at she who was chatting with someone and did not rush her. At the same time, at the Weibo headquarters on the 13th floor of the operations department. The operations director, Amos, looked at the news that he just received with a grave expression. A director of the board of directors asked him to remove Horace from the trending list and ban Hades's account. On the other hand, he had just received a report from his subordinate that the Chef King competition had just submitted a new event application and the funds had been received. They wanted to promote Hades's PK event. Amos knew what the organizers of the Chef King competition were thinking. Jasper's incident had brought some negative impact to the show. Before it could spread, Horace's incident had been exposed. Furthermore, he had brought along 2 veteran stars, Charlie and Bart. It had attracted the attention of the audience. This was better than any public relations method. More importantly, the McCarthy family was behind the Chef King competition. Miss Nancy was the person in charge and also had a seat on the board of directors. He could not afford to offend her. As the operations director, he was certainly happy to see this. He was even willing to give some traffic and a push. This year's KPI might be completed in advance. However, the matter now involved two major families. As a mere operations director, he was caught in the middle. It was too uncomfortable. This old pervert should have gone to hell long ago. Amos spat a mouthful of saliva. He asked his subordinates to suppress the heat while thinking about how to communicate with the Chef King competition. It was not the first time that the operations department had to clean up Horace's mess. Even limiting the flow of those bloody complaints was their operation. Amos often felt uneasy. However, if he did not take the position, someone else would take it. Today's incident was suddenly exposed, and it came out during the peak flow of the incident in the morning. The operations department was a little caught off guard. However, according to the usual practice, this incident should be left unsettled in the end. A pure person who had just announced to participate in a variety show and a well-respected director in the entertainment industry who had the backing of a major tycoon. It was like hitting a stone with an egg. However, looking at those words, Amos felt that it was particularly dazzling. Justice may be late, but it will never be absent. Guilt? Or fear? Weren't they also accomplices? They covered the mouths of those girls and let them die in despair. Amos shook his head and threw away the distracting thoughts in his mind. He dialed the number of the Chef King competition's director. Outside Tucker City, in a film and television base. The Grand War scene was spectacular. This was the scene set by the crew of the new War of Blood and Iron. It was directed by the famous director Horace and starred the powerful actors Charlie and Bart. These three were known as the Iron Triangle of action and war films. They had worked together on more than a dozen movies and had won many awards. However, at this moment, the Iron Triangle gathered in the director's office with a heavy expression. End of chapter. Chapter 24-29. Brother, what do we do now? Are we done for? Bart, who was famous for his calmness, looked at the bearded and long-haired Horace and asked in a trembling voice. Charlie, who was still wearing his armor, was also panicking. His lips were pale. They had seen the hot search on Weibo. That incident happened 5 years ago. It was so long ago that they couldn't even remember what the little girl looked like. Things like this had happened many times in the past 5 years. The importance of reputation to an actor was self-evident. Now that this incident had been exposed and received so much attention, their careers as actors had come to an end. What are you afraid of? She's just a nobody. I have the Dixon family behind me. This incident will end quietly, just like all the other incidents in the past. Horace was quite calm. He took a sip of tea and grinned, revealing his yellow teeth. I just saw a few girls among the extras. They're quite pretty. How about you choose one to play with tonight? When Charlie and Bart saw how calm Horace was, they felt a lot more at ease, and their expressions relaxed a lot. Which one do you like? I'll bring her to you. The girl who acted with me today is quite good. Do you want to try her? The two immediately started licking Horace's boots. As long as they could hold on to Horace's thighs, they wouldn't have to worry about not being able to act and not getting any awards. In the central city of Tucker City, where every inch of land was worth gold, there was a manor that occupied a large area. It had a large grassland and woods, a wide swimming pool, and a luxurious villa. It didn't fit in with the surrounding skyscrapers and floating castles. This was the Dixon Manor. It was owned by the Dixon family, one of the oldest and most powerful families in the underground city. At this moment, in a villa, an old man was talking to a young man. "I heard you're in trouble." The old man was the head of the Dixon family, Merlin. "Horace is in a bit of trouble. I've already notified Weibo. They'll take care of it." Fergus smiled and didn't take it to heart. "I told you a long time ago that Horace isn't a clean person. You should stay away from him to avoid trouble." Molin was a little displeased. Fergus' smile faded, and his expression became more respectful. He lowered his head and said, "You're right, but Horace is indeed talented. We've made a lot of money through him over the years, and there's no other director in the market who can afford to invest more than him." Mo Lin glanced at him and said in a low voice, "You have to remember your identity. You are fundamentally different from him." Fergus lowered his head even more and said respectfully, "Grandson understands. Clean it up. Don't let the McCarthy family get hold of any evidence." Molin raised his hand. "All right." Fergus got up and left. After leaving the villa, Fergus's face turned cold. He dialed a number on his bracelet and said in a cold voice, "Find out that Harrison's address and get someone to cripple his hand." "Miss Nancy, the micro-push operation just called me and asked if we can postpone the opening of the PK channel and the drainage activities. Also, can we temporarily block Hades's account?" At the filming site of the Chef King competition, a stout director walked into the director's office and asked the young woman sitting on the sofa. "No." The young woman sitting on the sofa was wearing a black haute couture dress. Her long brown hair fell over her shoulders. She raised her head and showed a pure and cold face. Her voice was as clear as an ice spring. "They want us to hide the truth for a rapist and murderer. Ridiculous." The director felt the air in the office become colder. He swallowed and nodded. "I'll call him right away. Tell him that we've transferred the money. Hades is our official contestant. If he dares to do anything, tell his boss to come see me," Nancy added in a cold voice. "Okay." The director turned and left the office. "This newcomer is quite interesting." Nancy clicked on Hades's homepage and the corners of her mouth curled up. She didn't want to stir up the dirty entertainment circle, but since someone had started it, she didn't mind adding fuel to the fire. Maybe it was because those words were soaked in blood and tears. Or maybe it was because she was moved by his words. In the CBD of Tucker City, on the top floor of the famous Twin Tower building, a beautiful woman in a bathrobe was lying on a deck chair next to the endless pool with bare feet. She was swiping her microblog with great interest. His fans have exceeded 3 million so quickly. This little brother is going to be popular. The woman clicked on Hades's main page and saw the first microblog he sent. It was a forwarded microblog. About 5 minutes later, the woman clicked on the comments with reddened eyes, intending to comment. As a result, she found that she couldn't comment. It should be said that the comments of this microblog were closed. As a surfer who had been in the circle for a long time and had many fans, of course, she could see that it was the work of microblogging. She had vaguely heard about Horace before, but she wasn't interested in this aspect, so she didn't go into depth. Today, when she saw this little sister's tears of blood, she felt great indignation. A weak girl was wantonly humiliated and played with by a man who held power. In the end, she didn't even have a place to complain and died in despair. Now that the matter had been exposed, these people were still covering for the murderer and trying to deal with the person who raised the problem. "Bastard, you don't take me seriously at all." The woman exited the microblog, dialed a number, and then cursed angrily. 3 minutes later, Hades's comments section was closed and there was an additional comment. "Hades, you're so righteous. I support you. Did you post this?" Meg looked at the lonely comment and turned to ask she. She glanced at the ID and found it familiar. Isn't this that rich little sister of yours? Meg took a closer look. The ID that shone with 7 colors was indeed quite familiar. Cute 3 years old. Ah. Meg was a little confused. Under the circumstances of reducing the microblog's popularity, closing comments, and banning reposts, this account could still post a comment, which meant that this was most likely a privileged account. So, she said that she owned the Twin Tower building, which was most likely true. This meant that she was a member of the Dixon family. Horace's backer was the Dixon family. This woman, who should have a high status in the Dixon family, actually posted such a comment in the comment section. She looked like a little fanboy. Meg felt that he was going to be confused. Chapter 24:30. As for Micropush CEO Lucian, he felt like he was about to go crazy. As the most glorious worker in the underground city, the emperor of work in the mouths of others, he had been the CEO of Micropush for 20 years and had experienced countless storms, but today was without a doubt the most painful experience for him. It was one thing for him to be sandwiched in the middle between the two corporations, but what was up with the demands of the corporation's internal division? Young Master Fergus of the Dixon family had just called him to suppress the discussion and not let it spread any further. As soon as he hung up, young Miss Acali had called and scolded him because he had been banned in the comments section. She had even threatened him with a trial by the board of directors. Because Micropush was too big, it had already been split up several thousand years ago. Other than the Dixon family and the McCarthy family on the board of directors, there were also the directors of the other 3 large corporations. Moreover, the government was the real major shareholder behind Micropush, and the influence of each major corporation in the government was different. This meant that each corporation had the means to influence Micropush. This was also a tacit understanding and balance that the corporations had reached with this huge company. So the CEO of Micropush had always been considered the most glorious and also the most headache-inducing position. Of his predecessors, there were few who had retired in glory. There were some who had left in a sorry state, some who had hung themselves, and some who had been sent to prison. To be able to hold the position for 20 years, this was the longest record of the Micropush era. Receiving a message made Lucian come back to his senses. He opened the personal information his secretary had just sent about Hades, who had caused this storm. Hades Saipan, both parents are dead. The first paragraph made Lucian's mind clear. Usually, people who came from orphanages like this were either abnormal or abnormally strong. For example, Marshal Ferdinand belonged to the latter. Lucian quickly looked over Hades' personal information and was a bit disappointed after reading it. Normal information, pure trash in cultivation, with a bit of talent in cooking. Because he was considered handsome, he was chosen by the program team as a guest to save Jasper after the incident. In his personal qualities, there was a teacher's evaluation of him, filled with a sense of justice. A sense of justice. What a rare character. Lucian gave a faint sigh. He had already solved the case. Obviously, this was just an accident. A young man with a strong sense of justice happened to see the bloody accusation when he first came into contact with Weibo. He angrily reposted it and fired a shot at the famous director Horace. Then, with the help of the traffic, it turned into a storm. What an interesting coincidence. That kid probably still didn't know what had happened. Maybe he was still proud of his Chunibu words. And now, he had to clean up after an unintentional act by a teenager. If he couldn't satisfy all parties, then he could just pack up and leave. From the looks of it, the McCarthy family has decided to protect your account. Also, due to the feud between the two families and the commotion caused by the chef's competition, your message won't be deleted, she said to Mag as he turned off the wristband. So, what were you doing just now? Meg asked with a serious expression. Submit the observer's log, she answered seriously. Meg was speechless. He thought that the reason this Weibo could survive was because she's military was involved in the struggle. So, she didn't do anything at all. She saw through Meg's thoughts and explained, since it's confirmed that this message won't be deleted, let the bullets fly for a while before the military gets involved. It doesn't look like there's an obvious connection. Meg nodded thoughtfully. Although the military's involvement could escalate the situation, it would undoubtedly raise the vigilance and suspicion of the major tycoons. He was aiming to enter the McCarthy family, so his background must be clean. Meg could not get involved in the struggle between the parties and was not in a hurry to send a second Weibo. The Chef's Championship had opened up his PK channel. In just half an hour, his PK points had reached 1.3 million. However, on the leaderboard, the contestant with the highest PK points had reached 130 million while the one with the lowest PK points had more than 80 million. Meg clicked on the video and began to understand the process and rules of the Chef's Championship to prepare for the quarterfinals. About half an hour later, the warship stopped outside a big city. Meg stood in the cockpit and looked at the huge city surrounded by walls that were dozens of meters high. He was amazed. This was a big city that he had never seen before. It was more than 10 times bigger than Chaos City. The towering skyscrapers and the floating castles in the sky made the city look three-dimensional. Countless flying vehicles traversed through the sky in an orderly manner, as if there was an invisible road that bound them. This is Tucker City? Meg asked. Yes, Tucker City, the capital of the underground city and the first fortress. She nodded and looked at the huge city in front of her with the same amazement in her eyes. Why is there a need to build walls in such a high-tech city? Meg raised his doubts. A wall that was dozens of meters high might be useful if it was on the Norland continent, but in this world where everyone was flying cars, was there any value in having a wall that could be penetrated by a sniper rifle? The underground world is also full of danger. This wall was built when the city was first built. Over tens of thousands of years, it has been constantly reinforced and strengthened by later generations. What you see is only the surface, she said calmly. Meg immediately understood. He could still roughly imagine the level of defense needed for this huge city that housed hundreds of millions of people. What about now? Do I go directly to the recording site? Meg asked. Warships are not allowed to enter Tucker City without permission. I will drive you to the recording site in a flying car. She walked to the back of the cabin. You're not going back to the Norland continent? Meg was surprised. He thought she had completed the mission by sending him to the underground city. This is your first time in the underground city and your first mission. I will be your assistant and help you complete the mission. She walked into the changing room and closed the door. 3 minutes later, a young woman in a black business suit walked out. Beautiful, who are you? Meg looked at the woman who had put on a delicate face and wore black-rimmed glasses. From now on, I'm your manager, Lola, a newcomer in the industry. She's voice had also changed. Her originally cold voice had become gentler. Okay. Meg nodded. As a new agent, he did not dislike people giving advice behind his back, let alone a beautiful woman like she who did not say much. End of chapter. Chapter 24:31. When they entered the city, she did not drive her wild and eye-catching supercar. Instead, she changed into a low-key black flying car. There was no road in the sky, but with more cars, there was a road. Meg looked at the live road that appeared on the front windshield and finally deciphered why so many flying cars could fly in an orderly manner. The sky was three-dimensional, so there was no need to wait for traffic lights at intersections. The flying car flew in different levels and was extremely fast. There were rows upon rows of skyscrapers on the ground. Almost all of them were hundreds of stories high. Hundreds of meters in the air, there were also skyscrapers that were hundreds of meters high. It was as if they had grafted a section of the entire city together. There were virtual screen advertisements everywhere. Even during the day, it did not affect their efforts to attract attention. Are the men in the underground city generally not very good? Meg asked curiously. What? Oh, nothing. I just saw a lot of advertisements for men's rehabilitation hospitals. Meg shrugged. If you need, I can take you to the nearest men's hospital, she said. Why would I need it? If I go, I'll only scare the doctor. Meg shook his head. As they chatted along the way, Meg was full of curiosity about many things in Tucker City. He had also fantasized about how humans lived when the world entered an era of super high technology. However, the real advanced civilization was still a little more advanced than his imagination. The Chef King competition was recorded in Mocha Building. As one of the most popular variety shows in recent years, Mocha Group gave a lot of support. She flashed her access pass and drove the flying car into the parking lot of Mocha Building. After entering the building, watch your words and don't trust anyone. Before getting out of the car, she reminded Meg with a serious expression. I may be better at this than you. Meg opened the door and got out of the car. You're Mr. Hades, right? I'm a staff member of the Best Cookery competition. The recording is about to begin soon. Please come with me. Meg had just alighted from the car when a young man came up to him with a smile. Meg glanced at the work ID on his chest. It was a staff ID from the program. Hello, I'm Hades' manager, Lola. Are we heading to the dressing room now? She came around from the other side of the car and asked the staff. The staff member was stunned for a moment before he urged, Yes, please come with me quickly. Because of today's incident, the director is extremely angry. It's best if you don't get into trouble. Please lead the way, she said. She exchanged glances with Meg and saw a trace of suspicion in each other's eyes. This way. The staff member led the way and led Meg and the others to a side passage. Meg looked at the sign above the passage. It was a freight passage. There's something wrong with this guy, Meg transmitted to she. Chapter 2432. Johnny was obviously relieved to see that Meg was not hurt. What happened this morning was enough to annoy him. Jasper was hospitalized because of the powder incident, and Hades, who was urgently called to put out the fire, was almost assassinated in the Mocha Building. If Miss Nancy had not arrived in time, they would not have been able to record today's show. Director, we need an explanation for this matter. We were almost killed today, she said with a serious expression. As an agent, this was one of her duties. Johnny smiled awkwardly. As the director of the Chef King competition, it was usually the agents who fawned over him. He had never been questioned like this before. However, today's situation was different. The incident happened in their place and the impersonated staff had been found in the utility room. However, the responsibility for this kind of incident was on them. Miss Nancy had already taught him a lesson and asked him to appease Hades and ensure that he could participate in the competition as usual. At the same time, he would not leak this matter out. Yes, we are the ones at fault. To show our sincerity, we will increase Mr. Hades' appearance fee by 1 million. Johnny said sincerely, I apologize to you on behalf of the show. At the same time, I hope you can keep this matter a secret to avoid more negative impact on the show. The tweet that Hades forwarded in the morning was still fermenting a storm. If he posted another one now, assassinated in the Mocha Building, I'll be scared to death. The hot search list would probably explode again. Meg clicked on the tweet in front of Johnny and glanced at his followers that had exceeded 5 million. Then, under Johnny's gaze, he clicked on the PK link of the Chef King competition. Looking at the PK value that was slowly increasing to 2 million, he sighed and said, "It's really difficult to catch up from zero." There was only an hour left before the show's live broadcast. Meg's PK value was not even a fraction of the lowest contestants. His online score would probably be 0. The top 8 contestants would advance to the top 4. The top 4 contestants had all exceeded 100 million PK points. This was not a fair competition at all. Meg exited the PK page and returned to his tweet homepage. He clicked on the post page and remained silent. A drop of cold sweat slid down Johnny's cheek. Ever since the Chef King competition, this was the first time he had been bullied by a newcomer. "Actually, I also feel that the rules of the competition are unfair to someone like you who joined the competition at the last minute, so I've discussed it with the program team. This time, in the quarterfinals, we'll reduce the proportion of online PK points from 20% to 10%, and the live judges' scores will account for 90%, Johnny said. This was actually a last-minute decision by him. Originally, the list of the top 4 had already been released. Hades had only asked Sure to save the day, and he would be directly eliminated today. "That's great, Director. You're really a fair person." Meg turned off the Weibo and looked at the director approvingly. "Johnny, then do your makeup well. I'll get the staff to prepare the clothes for you." Johnny nodded and left the dressing room. The rules had been changed, but Hades would still be eliminated today. He was very sure because he was the one who wrote the script. Meg and she looked at each other and the corners of their mouths curled up at the same time. Meg had studied the live scoring mechanism of the past 4 seasons of the Chef King. After entering the top 16, the score difference between the live judges' scores would become very small. The difference between the highest score and the lowest score was rarely more than 10 points, and the difference between the first and fourth place was even smaller. Therefore, in this case, online popularity became an extremely important reference data. This was obviously a sinister game concocted by the capitalists and the program team. In order to support their brother's promotion and debut, fans would crazily fight to bring huge traffic to the program and also rich economic benefits. Based on past experience, it was impossible for Meg to first concede 20 points and then rely on the live judges' scores to pull back 20 points to enter the semi-finals. Now, Johnny had made a promise to reduce the proportion of online PK points in the quarterfinals. This was considered to be giving Meg some preferential treatment and care. Of course, a 10-point difference was basically excluding him from the semi-finals for this kind of competition. However, Meg had great confidence. Although the Chef King competition was a variety show with more entertainment than professionalism, from the top 16 onwards, the 10-member jury was extremely professional. They invited industry bigwigs, top chefs, and gourmets. Therefore, even with the influence of the program team, the professional jury score rarely exceeded 95 points. More than 90 points was considered a high score. This was Meg's chance to reverse the score. The makeup artist for Meg was a petite young lady. Perhaps she was smitten by his beauty, but she blushed the entire time. "Mr. Hades, may I take a picture with you?" After the makeup was done, the lady finally mustered the courage to speak to him. "Of course, your makeup skills are impressive." Meg nodded with a smile and asked she to help take a picture of them. "You're so nice. I wish you success in the competition." The lady received the photo happily and sent her blessings. "Thank you." Meg got up and left the dressing room. Under the guidance of the staff, he went to the changing room. He knew that this girl would soon post their photo on Weibo, and then use some flattery to increase his favorability with some passers-by. You seem to enjoy the feeling of being a celebrity. She followed behind Meg and sent him a telepathic message with a slightly strange expression. She was originally worried that Meg would not be able to adapt to life in the underground city and everything around him was completely different from the Nora continent. However, it seemed that she had been worrying too much. Meg was not only adapting, but he was also like a fish in water. He even knew how to create a persona for himself and gain more fans. I love what I do. Meg said with a serious face, I'm also a professional when it comes to being an idol. What's an idol? In my hometown, it means a celebrity. The program team prepared a uniform for the contestants. Meg joined the team at the last minute, so the program team rushed to change a chef's suit for him. It barely fit him. The black and white color scheme was simple and bright. Meg changed into the chef's suit and immediately felt the frequent stares of several staff members. This was the trouble of being handsome. There are still 15 minutes before the live broadcast begins. All contestants, please go to the recording site. The staff will check the site equipment one last time to make sure that the audio output of the contestants' equipment is normal. Johnny's voice sounded from the broadcast, and the site immediately became busy. End of chapter. Chapter 2433. The Chef King competition was carried out live, which was a major test of the contestants' acting skills. Of course, this mode also brought about great fun. The audience could choose to watch the official version or watch the exclusive version of the contestants. Although Meg had not participated in the recording of a show in his previous life, he had seen pigs run. It was just a variety show, so he was not nervous. She had set up a stable and decent persona for him. It was not outstanding, but it was not too bad either. He just needed to perform well in cooking. At the same time, Meg received a contestant's code of conduct on his bracelet. The contract was handled by she, so Meg had no interest in it. While the staff was checking the equipment, he opened the contestant's code of conduct and glanced at it. There were no strange rules. Other than the basic confidentiality agreement, there were some restrictions on the contestant's personal character. One of them was probably a new addition. During the show, contestants are not allowed to contact fans in any way. It seemed that the program team was also scared by the Jasper incident. To avoid trouble, they directly set the rule that contestants were not allowed to contact fans. She said that this show had a script, but Meg did not get one. Obviously, he was a last-minute firefighter. In the director's mind, he did not need any lines at all. Your seat is over here. You should know the exact procedure, right? The staff member asked for confirmation as he led Meg to a stove. Yes. Meg nodded with a smile. Meg had thoroughly studied the competition process on the way here. Although it was a variety show, the Chef King competition was indeed well done in terms of professionalism. The on-site judges gave the contestants a comprehensive score based on their on-the-spot performance, knife skills, plate presentation, taste, and other dimensions, and came up with the final score. Even if the contestants had a script, there would always be judges who could justify themselves with clever words, thus prolonging the life cycle of the variety show. Everyone knew that the contestants had a script, but this effort was enough to make people feel their sincerity. The show's recording venue was very spacious. Mocha Group valued this show very much and directly gave the program team an entire floor. The top 8 contestants had already taken their places. Many of the contestants had their managers making the final adjustments and whispering some words to them. Meg's eyes briefly scanned the contestants. He had already memorized their information. His gaze landed on the judge's table, on the beautiful lady sitting in the corner. The black dress was sexy but not intellectual, and the indifferent expression on that beautiful face made people flinch. Nancy McCarthy, the noble lady, had just saved his life. Of course, that was what it looked like. As a direct descendant of the McCarthy family, Nancy had a certain right to speak in the family. As the president of the Mocha Group, she was also the person in charge of the variety show, the Chef King competition. What kind of domineering female CEO was this? Perhaps sensing Meg's gaze, Nancy suddenly raised her eyes and looked at Meg. Their eyes met briefly, and Meg smiled gratefully. Nancy withdrew her gaze indifferently, as if she was not interested in his warm smile. Meg raised his eyebrows. Of course, he was not disappointed. This kind of top-notch fair, rich, and beautiful woman was not someone who could be chased by a face. He still expected this. Then, Meg briefly looked at the judges on the judging panel. Most of them were veterans in the cooking industry, and the head chefs of certain top restaurants. Considering the long lifespan of the residents of the underground city, there was no lack of people who had been working for thousands of years. An excellent chef needed time to cultivate. Without at least 8 to 10 years of practice, no one would dare to embarrass themselves by showing off their knife skills that could truly be called excellent. Therefore, Meg did not doubt the cooking skills of these experienced chefs. The Chef King competition program team has opened a channel for you on Weibo and has given you good traffic support. By the end of the show, your PK value should be able to exceed 10 million. She came to Meg's side, handed him a glass of water, and said telepathically, 10 million is not enough. We have to prepare for the next competition. For tomorrow's semi-finals, the director will not change the rules for us. Meg took a sip of water and said telepathically without batting an eyelid. That depends on your performance today. If your performance is interesting enough, the promotion of the Chef King competition has never been stingy with traffic. This is more practical than anything else. She took back the glass of water. If that's the case, then there's no problem. Meg smiled confidently. He was best at subverting. The Norland continent's food was too crude and lacked some exquisite delicacies. As for the exquisite dungeon delicacies, they were lacking in the flavor of life. In that case, let him add to the fireworks. But, are you really not going to do anything? Meg looked at she, who was about to leave, and asked. I've done what I should, she said and turned to leave the stage quickly. Meg looked away. His wristband had been turned off. Otherwise, he would have opened the microchat to see what she had done. The design of the stage was quite interesting. It was a semicircular stage with 8 individual workstations. On the silver alloy workstations were various kitchen utensils, which were all prepared by the chefs themselves. Meg's workstation was very clean, but it was a little special. Other people had a set of knives, with dozens of fancy knives of various styles, but he only had a single factory kitchen knife with a wide and thick style. However, he had brought his own stove, an open stove that was hard to find in the market. Meg had learned the dungeon's kitchen utensils from she before coming here. Precision and automation were the biggest features. Even a complete novice could cook food that was passable as long as he followed the steps set by the system. However, it was only passable. At the same time, this overly precise tool added many restrictions. It was like putting shackles on the chef and locking the upper limit. Therefore, Meg chose to bring his own stove and let the people of the dungeon see the true charm of cooking. This newcomer doesn't look like a chef. I heard that because of Jasper's accident, the program team found a trainee from an agency at the last minute. He's probably here to show his face and prepare for his debut. I heard that he's quite good at cooking. He's a folk chef. Jasper was eliminated and one of the top 4 spots was given up. I just don't know who will take his place. The competition had not started yet. A few familiar contestants were chatting and their attention was focused on Meg. Their tone was quite relaxed. Obviously, they did not see Meg as a strong competitor. Meg turned a deaf ear. If he was serious about the contestants' clique, he would be the one to lose. At the same time, on the internet, hundreds of millions of dungeon netizens were eagerly waiting for the start of the Chef King competition. As a variety show that finished with high ratings, the Chef King competition had accumulated a terrifying number of fans. The cruel and efficient competition system, the exciting culinary duels, and the various exposés inside and outside the show made the audience very fond of this variety show. Today, on Weibo, there were many trending searches about the Chef King competition, especially about the new contestant, Hades Saipan. His accusation against director Horace was a big hit to the netizens. Unfortunately, the news seemed to be blocked. Besides Hades' Weibo, it was hard to find any related discussions on the internet. Even the marketing accounts that liked to eat human blood were collectively silenced. Because of this, more and more people followed Hades' account and wanted to follow up. Just 10 minutes before the Chef King competition started, a red verified account of the Dungeon Military Secretariat liked Hades' Weibo post and commented, "The people need the truth." Soon the Military Secretariat liked Hades' Weibo post. "The people need the truth." It was pushed to the trending searches and started to climb rapidly. The matter had been brewing for a few hours. This was the first official account to participate. And this official account was very special. It was the only verified account of the Dungeon Military Secretariat and represented the military's attitude. The military's attitude had always been important in the dungeon. Since Marshal Ferdinand promoted the military and political reforms, the tycoons started to restrain their influence on the military. Their attitude towards the military had also become restrained and cautious. "Chief, the topic is climbing rapidly. Should we continue to reduce it?" Amos ran directly to Lucian's office and asked anxiously. He felt like he was going crazy. The topic had just been suppressed and the Chef King competition had basically reached an agreement to use the topic's popularity to quell the topic. He didn't expect the military to suddenly interfere. "How do you plan to reduce it? Delete the Secretariat's post or block the account?" Lucian sneered and looked at him. Amos' face turned pale. As the operations director, he naturally knew the authority level of the Military Secretariat's account. It was the same level as the President's account. The level was a symbol of status and power. Not to mention him, even Lucian didn't have the authority to block the account. "Then, what should we do now?" Amos asked carefully. "We don't know which big shot in the military is behind this. But since the message was sent through the Secretariat's account, it represents the military's attitude," Lucian said seriously. "According to the microblogging code, we have no right to interfere with any actions of the military, including speaking. Remove all permissions on this topic and no longer restrict it." "But, if that's the case, how will the Dixon family respond?" Amos looked troubled. With the topic's current popularity, once the permissions were removed, comments and reposts would be opened, and keyword searches would no longer be restricted. Horace, Bart, and Charlie's scandals would be exposed in an instant. Now they should be concerned about how to distance themselves from Horace. Lucian looked at him calmly. Amos was slightly taken aback, and immediately showed a look of realization. He looked at Lucian with a bit more admiration. "I'll go arrange the work in the technical department." The office door slowly closed. Lucian looked at the scenery outside the window and a smile appeared on his face. He didn't know which big shot in the military wanted this, but it solved a problem for him. The CEO position of microblogging CEO wasn't easy to be. With so many forces involved, it was impossible to meet the requirements of every party. Therefore, to sit in this position, it was not enough to just be a professional. The skills of microblogging were the most important factor in whether or not you could stay in this position. Lucian had always been fair. He always stood on the side of the strong. When the Dixon family and the McCarthy family went against each other, it was very difficult for him because both families were very strong, and he couldn't afford to offend them. But now that the military secretariat was involved, the situation immediately changed. No matter how strong the Dixon family and the McCarthy family were, they were not as strong as the military. Moreover, he had the microblogging code as a basis, so he didn't hesitate to stand on the side of the military. Soon, the netizens found that the comments section of Hades's microblogging was opened, and the originally gray repost icon was lit up. No wonder he's the man under the military's protection. So, what's the truth? Horace is a scumbag. One of my sisters was depressed because of him. I suddenly found a lot of sisters accusing Horace on the microblogging. They can't all be true, right? The number of comments on Hades's microblogging post increased rapidly. The comment from the military secretariat was pinned at the top, followed by the comment from the cute 3-year-old. Brother Hades is so righteous. I support you. More and more victims and acquaintances of the victims posted their comments in the comments section, and they were all liked at the top. At the same time, the netizens searched for keywords such as Horace and Horace sexual assault and found many microblogging posts that were originally not very popular. Those microblogging posts that had been covered in dust finally saw the light of day again after the restrictions were lifted. Every word of the bloody accusation was completely hidden on the internet. The despair of the victims who had nowhere to complain was empathized by countless ordinary people. Horace is worse than a beast. Bart, Charlie, sexual assault. One by one, the trending searches were pushed to the top. It was like a storm had swept through the dungeon internet world. The marketing accounts that were originally silent seemed to have sensed the direction of the storm and started to join in the traffic storm. Hades's microblogging post at the center of the storm had been liked and reposted tens of millions of times. It's over, it's really over. In the film studio, Horace looked at the microblogging post with a pale face. Large beads of cold sweat rolled down his forehead. Bart and Charlie were trembling, and their faces were ashen. The likes and comments from the military secretariat were like a sharp three-edged sword that pierced their hearts and sentenced them to death. Looking at the heated comments, the famous directors and celebrities, who were used to receiving praise and flattery, had yet to recover from their fall from the altar. I want to communicate with young Master Fergus. Horace opened his bracelet with trembling hands. Chapter 24:34. Horace couldn't get through to Fergus. After staring at the bracelet for a while, Horace stood up and left, his face pale. Charlie and Bart hurriedly followed him, avoiding the staff's strange looks. They asked in panic, "Brother, what should we do? I've been abandoned by the Dixon family. If you don't want to spend the rest of your life in prison, leave before the law enforcers arrive." Horace's footsteps quickened. When he got out of the room, he immediately took out his flying car and drove away. Charlie and Bart looked at the flying car in a daze. After hesitating for a while, they drove away as well. Did Director Horace, Charlie, and Bart run away? A staff member at the scene happened to take a picture of this scene and posted it anonymously on the internet, causing another round of discussion. Tucker City, Dixon Manor. "Looks like you didn't handle the matter in the morning well," Molan said to Fergus calmly, sitting on the sofa in the villa. "The matter was already under control. I didn't expect the military to suddenly intervene." Fergus lowered his head, looking nervous. "I also heard that the guy who posted the tweet was assassinated in the Mocha building this morning." Molan looked at Fergus. "You did it, right?" Fergus's face changed slightly. He hesitated for a while, then nodded. I was too reckless. Dealing with people who raise problems has always been what we tycoons are good at. In the past tens of thousands of years, it's almost become a habit. Molin smiled, but his eyes suddenly became sharp. Times have changed. Nowadays, we don't have the final say in the underground city. Your little cleverness is just a joke in those people's eyes. Fergus's back was covered in cold sweat. He didn't expect that the assassin he sent to deal with a chef who was only a level 3 water mage would fail. Now that the military had made their stance clear, the tweets had completely turned to the military side. On the internet, Horace's scandals were flying everywhere. It was completely out of control. Horace, what do you plan to do? Molin looked at Fergus. Fergus thought for a while and said, the dead are the best scapegoats. His misdeeds were exposed, and what awaited him was only life imprisonment. Committing suicide to escape punishment is a very reasonable choice. Go. Clean up the mess you made. Don't leave any evidence for the McCarthy family to use against you. Molin raised his hand. Yes. Fergus bowed slightly and quickly left the villa. Interesting. I didn't expect that person to interfere in such matters. Is he preparing for something big again? Molin stood up and stood by the window, a cold smile hanging on his lips. On the top floor of the Twin Towers, Akali's wristband had 2 screens. On one side was the Chef King competition live broadcast and on the other side was a push button. Horace, that old bastard. How could he do so many bad things? I even had a meal with him last time. Now that I think about it, it's really disgusting. But this old bastard seems to have a good relationship with Fergus. As expected, birds of a feather flock together. Both of you are nothing good. From the looks of it, little brother Hades is indeed handsome and righteous. No, I have to top up his account. Akali muttered. She opened several fan groups with over 10,000 people and began sending red packets. Miss Nancy, take a look at the micropush now. When Nancy was prepared to turn off her wristband, she received a message from the director. Nancy looked in the director's direction and saw that Johnny's expression was a bit anxious. Could it be that before the broadcast, something had happened? She clicked on the hot search list, and the hot searches made her stunned. As for Horace's news, it had already been taken off the hot search list. But now 6 of the top 10 were related to Horace and the top 3 were all taken. Nancy quickly found the reason and this made her even more surprised. The military actually came. Nancy bit her lips. This was a bit unexpected. If it was like this, it was clear that the Dixon family had already given up on Horace. They should be cutting off their connection with Horace right now. Seeing the Dixon family suffer and the murderer Horace fall, Nancy should be happy. But now that the Chef King competition was about to start and there were only 7 minutes left, the internet was focused on something else. This was not a good thing for the program. Thinking about it, her eyes fell onto the 7th hot search list. She sent a message to Johnson, have the publicity department push 7th hot search to first hot search. Johnson's eyes lit up when he received the message. He immediately got up and arranged it. Soon, the 7th hot search topic, Chef King competition contestant Hades, Brother Justice, began to climb rapidly and directly climbed to the first hot search. The second hot search topic was, Military Secretariat praises Hades. The fuse of Horace's incident was that Hades had reposted and commented on the news, which then caused a series of reactions. The injustice of a humiliated girl who committed suicide was upheld and Horace's beast-like crime was exposed because of Hades's brave and righteous voice. Therefore, people did not feel disgusted by this hot search topic. Instead, they spontaneously added to it to increase the popularity of the topic. At this time, the ghostwriters of the program group began to crazily attract people to the program. Brother Justice is participating in the Chef King competition. Let's go support him. Justice will not be absent. So will we. We will make Brother Justice the Chef King. I just want to see what such a righteous little brother looks like. Brother Hades's PK value is so low. I want to give him a ranking. The ghostwriter's comments were mixed with the support of passers-by. People in between surfing began to click on the live broadcast interface and give Hades a PK value. The live broadcast ratings of the Chef King competition began to skyrocket. The number of viewers through the micro-channel had exceeded 500 million, surpassing the peak of last season's final. This was also the highest number of viewers this season. Get ready to start recording. Nancy sent a message to Johnson and turned off her wristband. She couldn't help but look at Meg on the stage. He was found by the program group at the last minute. She had seen his information. He was a trainee under a small management company. In addition to his handsome appearance, he also had good cooking skills. This was something that other trainees from other companies could not compare to, so he was chosen in the end. Now, it seemed that this choice was extremely successful. Not only did it offset the negative impact of Jasper's incident, but it also caused the Dixon family to suffer a loss because of the Horace incident. It also brought a lot of traffic to the program. If his cooking skills are good, it would be a good choice to let him enter the top 4. It should be able to maintain the popularity for a while. Nancy thought. However, whether he could pass or not still depended on his cooking skills. Countdown to recording, 10, 9, 8, Johnny began the countdown. The contestants and judges straightened up and got into the shooting mode. Meg looked straight ahead with a natural expression. Before coming here, she had already trained him to appear on camera. He knew how to express himself freely in front of the camera and maintain a handsome and elegant posture at all times. When the countdown ended, the camera cut to the center of the stage. The male and female hosts appeared and announced the start of the Chef King competition with a smile. They then introduced the top 8 contestants and the 10 professional judges. When it came to Meg, they gave him more screen time and praised him. Meg was quite satisfied with this. It showed that the program group was still trying to fight for some fairness for him. Is this Brother Justice? I love him. This young man has thick eyebrows and big eyes. He's a handsome young man. Fuck, this smile. Mom, I'm in love. The screen was full of comments. It was obvious that netizens were paying attention to Meg. After a round of introductions and 2 commercials, the host announced the start of the top 8 competition. The rules for the quarterfinals have changed greatly from the previous ones. The production team will only provide food ingredients, but they will no longer limit the number of dishes. Every contestant can choose the ingredients they need from the food ingredients and cook them within 2 hours. The contestants will be judged first if they finish first. The professional judges will give a comprehensive score based on the contestants' performance. For the top 8 competition, we have revised the total score ratio from the online score to the live judges' score from 2, 8 to 1, 9 to reflect fairness. The host announced the new rules. The contestants had already received the notice in advance, so they had no objections. Even if the rules were changed, with Hades's current PK value, which was close to 0, it was equivalent to having 10 points deducted when competing with them. It did not affect him much. However, the audience who had been following the show were a little shocked. Why did they change the rules at the last minute? Isn't this too unfair to my brother? This is a last-minute rule change for Brother Justice's participation, right? As expected of the man who was praised by the Secretariat. He has a strong backing. It's still a hellish difficulty for Brother Justice to advance to the top 4. If you don't vote, I don't vote. How can Brother Justice enter the top 4? Vote your PK value. Meg's PK value increased rapidly from more than 1 million to 5 million with the help of a group of passers-by fans. It was climbing rapidly towards 10 million. Meg knew nothing about this. He only had one thought in his mind, which was to increase the gap between him and the contestant in 4th place and advance to the top 4. The ingredient warehouse was opened, and hundreds of ingredients appeared on the big screen. From seafood to delicacies, everything was available. I want a yellow arowana. I want a black jade tortoise. The contestants began to choose the dishes they needed. This ingredient warehouse contained all the ingredients needed for the contestants' dishes, so they could avoid the embarrassment of not having any dishes to cook. Meg was in 8th place, listening to the contestants choose the extremely precious ingredients one by one. He was quiet and calm. Now, contestant Hades, please choose the ingredients you need, the host said to Meg. I need a black sheep, 3 lemons. Meg listed a bunch of ingredients. Black sheep. He's going to cook mutton in the Chef King competition. At the judges' table, the white-haired old chef Hunter said in surprise. It's a little strange. The other contestants all chose the best ingredients, but he only chose an ordinary black sheep, the judge next to him agreed. Maybe he can cook mutton into a delicacy. Nancy said with a smile. That's something to look forward to, old Hunter said. Meg's choice of ingredients also attracted the attention of the netizens. The yellow arowana was a level 8 demonic beast that only appeared in the northwest Arctic Ocean. It was rare and powerful, and it was extremely precious. Most people had never even seen it before, let alone tasted it. The black jade tortoise was even more precious. It was said that its shell was a natural jade. If it was more than 10 centimeters in diameter, it would be auctioned. The other contestants' choices were also extremely precious. Why was the Chef King competition so popular? Other than the professionalism and interest that the food variety shows on the market lacked, the director's team was not short of money, which was also a big selling point. Here, one could see how many precious ingredients were cooked into delicacies, and a group of masters would taste and introduce them on the spot. The black jade tortoise was the best ingredient in the quarterfinals. This program was inhumane. It was precisely because of this that Mag chose a black sheep as the main ingredient even though there were still many precious ingredients in the ingredients warehouse. That was really a shock to everyone. This country bumpkin, don't tell me he doesn't know what a high-end ingredient is. The contestants on the same stage could not help but look at Meg, and they all had the same thought in their minds. The best ingredients only needed to be cooked simply to bring out the best taste. The culinary skills could be enhanced by the ingredients, and thus, the contestants would get good ratings from the judges. This was the knowledge that was recognized in the Chef King competition, and it was also what everyone followed. I'd like to see if you're just putting on a bad show, or if you have absolute confidence. Nancy looked at Meg with interest, and there was a little bit of anticipation in her eyes. The contestants' ingredients were sent up one after another. Every high-end ingredient was given a close-up shot, and the host introduced it just right, satisfying the audience's curiosity. When the black goat was carried onto the stage, the audience's interest was greatly reduced. The black sheep was a specialty of the black sheep grassland. Although it was 3 times more expensive than ordinary sheep, it was still an ingredient that could be easily found in the market. Meg reached out and touched the head of the black sheep goat, and nodded with satisfaction. The black sheep goat was well-proportioned and had a strong physique, which met his requirements very well. He knew what the others were thinking, but it did not affect his state of mind at all. No matter how good an ingredient was, if there was no matching cooking skill, it would just be a waste of the ingredient. yellow dragon fish, black jade tortoise. He had never even seen these precious ingredients before. It was completely nonsense to ask him to choose one to cook and make it delicious. However, it was different for sheep. He was familiar with it. He could cook it too. The 2-hour countdown begins now. Contestants, please start cooking. The host's voice sounded. A 2 o'clock countdown appeared on the upper right corner of the contestants' workstations. The contestants began to process the ingredients and prepare to cook. Mag, on the other hand, took the cleaver from the knife rack and led the sheep to the slaughterhouse. The first step of others was to kill fish and tortoise, but his first step was to slaughter the sheep. Chapter 24:35. Thousands of years after the slaughtering and rearing industry had been automated, most of the residents in the underground city had never seen a live sheep slaughtered. In the past 4 seasons of the Chef King competition, there had never been a live slaughtering of a large animal. In the past, the producers would prepare the meat for the chefs according to their needs. But today, Hades brought a black sheep onto the stage. It seemed like he was going to slaughter it in front of the camera. One could only imagine how bloody the scene would be. However, in a high-end show like the Chef King competition, watching a sheep slaughter seemed to have a special magic effect. It made the audience look forward to it even more. In addition to Hades's current fame and popularity, nearly half of the bullet screen comments were related to him. "Director, do we have to cut the scene to the live broadcast? Won't it be too bloody?" the cameraman asked Johnson worriedly. "The contestants' camera will film as usual. The producers will change the camera accordingly," Johnson replied. He was not very confident. Hades had joined the production team at the last minute and had only arrived before the start of the show. There was no time for communication or rehearsal. The contestants started to prepare the ingredients and got busy. The judges also looked at Meg. With their status, they were not surprised by the so-called precious ingredients on the stage. "The last time I saw a live sheep slaughter was more than 200 years ago in the wild wolf tribe in the north of the Highly Grassland. That tribe still has the tradition of slaughtering sheep to celebrate festivals. The way the elders slaughtered sheep was amazing," Old Hunter said. "What? Do you think a sheep slaughtered with your own hands will have more soul?" David, a young food critic, asked with a smile. "It's a kind of ritual. Of course, in the words of you young people, it's not wrong to say that it has a soul." Old Hunter nodded with a smile. "I think he's just slaughtering the sheep for a gimmick," Julian, the head chef of Tucker Hotel, said with a hint of sarcasm. "It's the first round." "I think he's here to show off his skills," a judge retorted. "And, whether it's a gimmick or a real skill, the answer will be revealed soon." Nancy curled her lips and looked at Meg. Somehow, she had an inexplicable confidence in him. The judges' conversation was cut into the live broadcast. The argument between the judges was another highlight of the show. Slaughtering sheep was bound to be bloody. This was the same for slaughtering any medium to large mammal. For example, during the New Year, a group of burly men put a fat pig on a butcher's stool to be slaughtered. Although the black fierce goat was not a precious ingredient, it weighed over 100 pounds, had a strong physique, and had the wildness of a level 1 magic beast. It was not something that an ordinary chef could deal with easily. Meg didn't want to leave the audience with the impression of a bloody butcher in his debut show, so he had to be elegant. Like carrying a little chick, he placed the black sheep on the slaughterhouse. The first step was to let out the blood. He pierced the sheep's throat with a knife and inserted a water pipe into the wound to prevent blood from splattering everywhere. Next was the removal of the sheepskin. Meg's knife made a few cuts on the sheep's body and tore it a few times. It was as if he was taking off the black sheep's clothes. The sheep's skin and hair were peeled off. The smooth surface of the mutton had no scars at all. There was no wool left either. This technique looks really good at relieving stress. Yang, what happened? Where's my fur coat? My family runs a farm. To be honest, the machine is not as clean as him. The bullet screen was obviously shocked by Meg's technique. It attracted a lot of praise. After removing the sheep's skin, Meg cut open the sheep's stomach and took out all the internal organs one by one. He washed the inside of the sheep with clean water and began to take apart the lamb chops. The kitchen knife pierced through the lamb chops like a fish in water. It accurately avoided the hard bones, cut open the fascia, cut open the flesh, and took out 2 large lamb chops from the sheep's body. There were 12 lamb chops on each side of the 50 kilograms big sheep. There were 2 large chops. Meg looked at the superb texture of the lamb chops in his hand and nodded in satisfaction. The program team had provided good ingredients. After taking out the lamb chops, Meg did not stop. Instead, he dissected the whole sheep. The broad kitchen knife shuttled through the meat. It followed the structure of the sheep's body and cut open the large spaces between the tendons and bones. It followed the space between the joints and actually did not cut the bones at all. The whole process was as smooth as flowing water. It was like an artistic performance. In just a few minutes, the whole black sheep was completely dissected into a pile of ingredients. Lamb chops that were suitable for roasting, hind legs and upper brain meat that could be used for skewers and stewed. According to the different cooking methods, Meg had cut up the lamb chops neatly. This technique is amazing. Hunter looked at Meg in amazement. Without slaughtering tens of thousands of sheep, you can't be so skilled, right? David was also amazed. He did not forget to tease, "Did you find this contestant from a slaughterhouse?" Julian looked a little embarrassed. He looked away and pretended not to see it. The chefs were good at cooking, and the gourmet was good at typing on the keyboard. However, this method of dissecting sheep was beyond their expertise, so they were indeed amazed. He's really good at hiding his skills. Nancy's smile deepened. The director cut to the camera and broadcast the whole process of Meg dissecting the sheep. The audience was also stunned by Meg's sheep dismemberment technique. Eyes, I got it. Hands, you're dreaming. This is the first time I've realized that butchering can also be aesthetically pleasing. This is really a treasure, chef. I'm a fan now. Meg only took 2 mutton chops and returned to his stove. He signaled the staff to take away the rest of the mutton. Slaughtering sheep seemed to be a very complicated process, but Meg only took 15 minutes. The contestant next to him was still competing with the yellow arowana fish. Even if it was out of the water, an 8th-grade magical beast was still a tyrant to a chef. He made a few simple cuts on the lamb and began to marinate it. The charcoal grill was placed on the stove. The charcoal fire was already burning. When the lamb chops were ready, the charcoal fire was just right. While waiting for the lamb to be marinated and the charcoal fire to burn, Meg stood at his seat and calmly admired the performance of his contestant. The contestant next to him was tall. He had thick eyebrows, big eyes, fair skin, a high nose, and a muscular body. At first glance, he looked like a man. His name was written on his nameplate, Iman. Meg had seen his profile before. Iman came from Tucker's Hotel, and was the favorite student of the judge named Julian on the stage. He was able to get to this stage not because of his connections. His cooking skills could be ranked in the top 3 among the contestants. The ingredient he chose was the yellow arowana fish. The fish's body was golden, and its scales were delicate and smooth. The fish's meat was actually somewhat similar to the dragon's head. The name was appropriate. The fish had been dissected. The organs were crystal clear. There was no fishy smell in the air. Instead, there was a faint fragrance, which surprised Meg. Chapter 24:36. System, can I raise this fish? Meg asked in his heart. This fish looked good, and it should not be a problem to use it to make sashimi. If you sell this fish, aren't you afraid that the giant dragon clan will come and kill you? The system asked softly. What's there to be afraid of? The princesses of the Frost Dragon clan and the Golden Dragon clan are in our hands. They can't do anything, Meg said calmly. Then let me borrow a seed, the system said. Meg chatted with the system while looking at the contestants on the stage. The 7 contestants were all holding top-grade ingredients. The most miserable one was the guy who chose the black jade turtle. The black jade turtle was indeed beautiful. The turtle shell was green and smooth, and the quality was excellent. Under the light, it glowed with a faint green light. It was definitely the best jade. Moreover, this black jade turtle was not small. Its diameter was more than 20 centimeters. If the turtle shell was put in the auction, it would easily fetch an 8-digit price. It would be the most expensive item in the auction. But, the other contestant wanted to take away the turtle shell. Under the supervision of 2 professional staff, the contestant carefully separated the turtle shell from the turtle meat. Then, he watched as the other contestant took away the black jade turtle shell, leaving behind a turtle shell that rolled its beady eyes around. Meg guessed that the black jade turtle might have been borrowed by the production team. They had discussed it with the owner. The turtle shell would belong to him, and the turtle meat would belong to the production team. This black jade turtle would be gilded on the show, and it could be sold for a good price in the auction house. And the appearance of a black jade turtle in the Chef King competition could also bring a wave of popularity to the show. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. While the others were in full swing, Meg was watching the show. The audience did not know whether to laugh or cry. By the way, did Hades buy an infield ticket? Is he here to watch the live show? Looking at the countdown, I feel like I'm more anxious than him. Is he only good at slaughtering sheep? How can he be in the mood to watch the show in such an intense competition? The judges didn't say much. They had seen Meg marinating the ingredients earlier. He was obviously waiting for the ingredients to be marinated. However, in order to make themselves look more professional, most players would find something else to do while waiting. Even if it was useless to show off, they wouldn't choose to watch a show in this kind of situation to make themselves look less professional. After looking around, Meg withdrew his gaze and slowly began to mix the sauce for the roasted lamb chops. Meg was an amateur when it came to roasting lamb chops. He didn't get any recipes from the system, nor did he enter the test field for the god of cooking to undergo the hellish training. However, he had tried roasting lamb chops, lamb legs, and even whole lamb during his travels. He was quite knowledgeable about sauces, seasonings, and fire control. The sauces were modified from the roasted lamb skewers. After some slight adjustments, it was more suitable for the taste of the lamb chops. The marinating of the mutton was also very important. The mutton smell of the black sheep was very light, but Meg still did a full set of treatments to remove the mutton smell. The cooking wine was brought from the underground city. After a careful massage with a few spices unique to the underground city, the mutton smell was 100% removed. Meg purposely slowed down the pace of these steps, including the amount of seasonings. He also used a spoon to demonstrate precisely. His idea was very simple. How could he make a recipe widely spread? The steps had to be simple and clear, and the seasonings had to be precise enough. He had analyzed the various dishes that appeared in the Chef King competition. The ingredients had to be precious enough, and the cooking method had to be classy enough. The chefs could show off their skills, but if the audience could learn it, it would count as the show's loss. Hence, the show had been produced for 5 seasons. Every season was very popular, and there was a lot of discussion. However, there wasn't a single dish that really made it out of the circle. Meg was here, and he planned to change this tradition. If it was so difficult to gain fans on the Norland continent, why not try it in the underground city? Even though the system said that this world didn't have the foundation to become a god through incense, Meg still wanted to give it a try. Meg took out the mutton chops from the accelerated marinating oven. He brushed a layer of oil on the surface and placed it on the wire grill of the oven. The other contestants all had high-end ingredients and high-end smart kitchenware in front of them. Only Meg had a simple charcoal grill and 2 black sheep chops in front of him. The charcoal wasn't burning brightly. It was slowly grilling over a small fire. After a while, the oil started to boil, and the mutton shrunk in a hurry. As the oil shimmered, the aroma of the roasted mutton started to spread slowly. His cooking method is very ancient, and the mutton chops look a little oily. There's no separation between the charcoal and the food. Won't the rising charcoal and soot stain the mutton chops? It's a disaster when those messy seasonings are put together. I can't imagine how terrible the taste will be, David said with a frown. David frowned. As a clean freak gourmet, he had strict requirements when it came to cooking. Yes, this kind of dish can't be served to the guests in Tucker Hotel. Food hygiene and safety are the most important things in the food and beverage industry. Julian nodded in agreement. That's because you haven't seen a whole lamb roasted directly on a pile of freshly burned charcoal. I think Hades's cooking is very good. He has shown us a traditional cooking method. The charcoal and the lamb chops are separated by a layer of steel wire mesh. When the oil drips into the charcoal, a faint flame rises. This is the first time that such smoke and fire has appeared in the Chef King competition. Old Hunter didn't hide his admiration for Meg. He praised, since chefs from all over the world have gathered in this competition, we should treat each contestant with a tolerant attitude. I agree with Old Hunter. Smoke is a word that only appears in books in recent years. It's not a good thing, Nancy said with a smile. The judges' table was not far from the console, so the contestants could hear the judges' conversation clearly. Some of the contestants looked at Meg with pity. A contestant who was rejected by the judges wouldn't be able to advance to the next round. Meg was quite calm. He was here to overturn the mainstream food and beverage industry. The charcoal roasted mutton chops were only a side dish, so it wasn't worth making a fuss about. The icy-cold high-end kitchen utensils were absolutely accurate, but they had lost the smoke and fire of cooking. An overly meticulous diet might be healthier, but to Meg, it had lost its soul. As time passed, the contestants on the stage were nearing the end of their stewing, boiling, roasting, and cooking. Various fragrances seeped out from the wok and floated in the air, competing with each other. This was a setting by the program team. They didn't isolate the smells, but instead, they allowed the smells to drift freely. The judges could smell the smells of the contestants cooking. As for who could cook better, it would depend on their own abilities. Chapter 24:37. Indeed, only simple cooking is needed for high-end ingredients. Meg smelled the aroma in the air and couldn't help but sigh. He flipped his lamb chop over. The aroma in the air was tempting, but to Meg, it was bland. It was the freshness of the main ingredient. For example, Iman's yellow arowana had been steamed, which amplified the freshness of the fish and made it even more tempting. But, that was it. Although he agreed with the concept of high-end ingredients and simple cooking methods, But if high-end ingredients were matched with high-end cooking methods, they would definitely surpass the former by a few streets. In the current mainstream cooking concepts in the dungeon, health was the most important, followed by the taste of the ingredients. It wasn't that there was anything wrong with the two, but focusing too much on these 2 points would often lead to the loss of many other flavors. Just like a person who only ate fresh fish soup, he wouldn't be able to taste the sourness of the spicy and sour fish, or the spicy and spicy grilled fish. The 7 contestants on the scene all followed this philosophy. Whether it was stewed black jade turtle or steamed yellow arowana, they couldn't escape this rule. This was also the reason why half of the judges didn't think highly of him at all. It was contrary to their culinary philosophy. The lamb chop was flipped over, and the aroma that had just floated up was suppressed again. Carbon-grilled lamb chop wasn't as fast as using high-end cooking utensils. It was important to roast it slowly over a small fire. Otherwise, it would be overdone if it wasn't cooked properly. Meg wasn't in a hurry. It was only half the time, and he didn't have to fight with them over the useless first dish. It's indeed the black jade turtle. It can release such a tempting aroma even when stewed. I think Iman's yellow arowana is more fragrant. Although it's steamed, the secret sauce makes the aroma even more intense. He's indeed Julian's disciple. The aroma of the yellow arowana is indeed not bad. It faintly suppresses the other aromas. The judges didn't idle around. They began to sniff and evaluate the aroma. All the contestants received comments, and most of them were positive. The strange thing is, I don't smell any mutton at all. Julian looked at Meg with a smile, and said, could it be that the fire has gone out? It's normal that you can't smell it. The other contestants all chose top-quality ingredients. The smell of the black sheep is definitely completely suppressed. When choosing ingredients, the contestants should consider this aspect. David said. It was a reminder to the other contestants that they needed to be more careful when choosing ingredients in the later rounds of the competition. Nancy looked at Meg. His expression was as calm as ever. He held a brush in his hand and unhurriedly brushed the lamb chop with oil. He didn't seem to be affected by the judges' comments. This concentration and calmness actually made Nancy a little stunned. Sure enough, men who are serious about their work have a special charm. Nancy snapped out of her daze and couldn't help but laugh inwardly. She hadn't expected to be stunned by a player. This had never happened before. Come on, black sheep. Good luck, brother Hades. Could it be that only high-end ingredients can make delicious food? Could it be that these judges eat yellow dragon fish every day? I don't care, I support brother Justice. Seeking a counterattack. Seeking a slap in the face. This is the first time I've seen food that I can afford to eat in the Chef King competition. I hope to have a good result. Compared to the judges' pessimistic prediction of Meg, the comments on the internet had a completely opposite attitude. There were voices of support. Judge, I'm done. Alfonso, the contestant who chose the black jade turtle, said. He was the first to finish the competition. The live broadcast camera cut to Alfonso's stove and zoomed in on the dish. The shell of the black jade tortoise was taken away, and the several pieces of stewed black jade tortoise were reassembled into a whole tortoise. Furthermore, a crystal-clear tortoise shell was carved out of some kind of melon, giving it a different kind of beauty. Meg took some time to look at the big screen. This guy's carving skills were pretty good. The turtle shell was carved very lifelike. Moreover, he made full use of the melon's characteristic that it would become transparent after ripening, making the dish even more beautiful. The cooking method of stewing was very simple, but the carved turtle shell was enough to add a lot of points. This was the so-called operation of the restaurant. Although it was useless, it could definitely quadruple the price. Judge, I'm done, too. Then, Iman, who was next to Meg, raised his hand to signal the judge. The camera cut to Iman's stove immediately. In the long fish plate, a glittering yellow arowana stood among the clouds, as if it was about to soar into the sky. Several mountain rocks and water plants carved with radishes and melons added a bit of artistic conception to the dish. Meg nodded slightly. This Iman's cooking skills were really good. Whether it was his knife skills, his control of the fire, or his imagination in the plate arrangement, he was much better than the black jade turtle. With the presentation of this dish, he should be able to enter the top 4. Wow! This yellow arowana is so beautiful. I think it will be delicious. My turtle, it's still not as good as a dragon. Chef Iman deserves to be the chief disciple of Tucker Hotel. I give him a thumbs up. As the contestants' dishes began to be presented, the audience also began to become lively. According to the rules of the Chef King competition, the finished dishes would be presented to the judges immediately. The judges would taste and grade them on the spot to ensure that they were in the best state. The ratings of the other contestants would naturally affect the state of the contestants who had not finished their dishes yet. The program team was playing with the heartbeat of the contestants. Alfonso's black jade turtle stew and Iman's yellow arowana were brought to the judges' table. There was a conveyor belt on the judges' table. The two dishes slowly moved in front of the judges, ensuring that each of them could closely observe the details of the dishes, as well as smell the dishes up close. When the two dishes were placed together, the difference in appearance was obvious at a glance. The steaming method had preserved the shape of the yellow arowana very well, and the exquisite plate arrangement had added a lot of points. As for the black jade turtle stew, although it was served in a crystal bowl, there was still a clear gap between the two. The steaming method preserved the shape and exquisite appearance of the yellow arowana. The hidden knife pattern ensured that the taste would enter the dish without destroying the appearance of the fish. Contestant Iman's idea is very ingenious, David praised. The other judges also nodded, expressing their approval of Iman. Contestant Alfonso's idea is also very ingenious. After the black jade turtle shell was taken away, he used the crystal melon carving to replace it. The carving is exquisite, and the effect is quite good, Old Hunter commented on Alfonso's work. After admiring the plate arrangement and the appearance of the dishes, it was time for the main event, tasting. The staff members served the fish and turtle soup to each of the judges for them to taste and evaluate. Chapter 24:38. The fish is tender, light, sweet, and mellow. The Tucker Hotel's exclusive sauce adds layers to the fish's taste. This steamed yellow arowana is amazing. Gourmet David was the first to speak. He was full of praise for Iman's steamed yellow arowana. The fish's texture is excellent. The control of the heat is just right. The choice of sauce and seasoning is also very good. It accentuates the freshness of the yellow arowana and elevates the taste to another level. Another judge praised. I think this turtle soup is the best. It's my first time tasting a 3,000-year-old black jade turtle. This stewing method is not a waste. It's a wise choice to not add too many ingredients. The crystal melon added at the end didn't affect the taste of the soup at all. Instead, it added a hint of fragrance. Old Hunter put down the bowl in his hand and nodded with satisfaction. The judges expressed their opinions and gave their comments on the two dishes. Meg casually brushed oil on the lamb chop and flipped it while eating the melon. From the judges' comments, Iman's steamed yellow arowana was obviously better than Alfonso's stewed turtle. Although the black jade turtle soup was also highly praised, the overly simple cooking method covered up the contestants' cooking skills to a certain extent. After the comments, the judges directly gave their scores to the two dishes. The competition used a 100-point system. Each judge's score was based on a 10-point system. The total score of all the judges was the total score. The scores were quickly calculated. Iman got 90 points and was temporarily in first place. Alfonso got 82 points and was temporarily in second place. 90 points was considered a good score in this season's competition. Coupled with Iman's third-place PK value, he was basically guaranteed to be in the top 4. As for Alfonso, whose PK value was at the bottom, he was basically eliminated. Meg nodded in his mind. Iman's stable performance, coupled with his status as a backdoor entrant, still only got 90 points. It was clear that the judges were very strict. This was a good thing for him. At least it gave him a chance to enter the top 4. As Iman and Alfonso's scores were announced, the atmosphere in the room became tense. The contestants finished their dishes one by one and were brought to the stage by the staff. They were evaluated by the judges and then given their scores. Just as Meg had expected, there was not much difference between the scores of the contestants. Among the 6 contestants, the lowest score was 78 points, while the highest score was 92 points. So far, the highest score was set by a contestant named Angelina. Her rainbow phoenix had won unanimous praise from the judges. It was a delicacy cooked with the best wild pheasant as the main ingredient. Through the decoration of various ingredients, it completed the magical operation of turning a pheasant into a phoenix. Meg had seen Angelina's information before. Among all the contestants, she was the only pure contestant who didn't have a management company backing her. However, she could be considered as a slightly famous food promoter in the micro-promotion industry. Compared to the other contestants, her culinary specialty was to give the food a sense of beauty. She was like an artist who had the ability to turn something rotten into something magical. She could make food that looked ordinary become beautiful and artistic. The contrast between before and after was extremely pleasing to the eye. Therefore, Angelina was also regarded as a strong contender for the championship. The other 7 contestants had finished their matches one after another, and the judges were already half full. At the same time, everyone's eyes and cameras were focused on the last contestant on the stage who was still cooking, Meg. The aroma of various delicacies in the air had yet to dissipate. Coupled with the previous wonderful comments of the judges, even the air seemed to be extraordinarily delicious. The time is almost up. Is he still not done? Contestant Hades won't be the first contestant to exceed the time limit in the championship, right? He's skilled in butchering sheep, but his cooking efficiency needs to be improved. Otherwise, he'll only be a butcher. The fans were anxious, but the fans of the other contestants had turned on their mocking mode. The other contestants also looked at Meg with the mentality of watching a good show. Although the contestants who had been eliminated were sad, they felt much better when they looked at Meg. Those who thought that they had successfully advanced were even more relaxed. The judges present were not in a hurry. Anyway, they couldn't get off work before the time was up. Instead of continuing to praise the contestants after they finished their matches, it was more relaxing and interesting to give advice when the contestants were present. There's a reason why such an ancient cooking method like charcoal roasting has been eliminated. Not many customers can wait for such a long time. Julian smiled. He was in a very good mood at the moment. His precious disciple was going to advance to the semi-finals as the second contestant. Except for the ancient tribes that preserve the tradition, this kind of cooking method is rarely seen nowadays. The lack of hygiene is an important reason for its elimination. David nodded and said, "What do you know about charcoal roasting?" "It's the essence of charcoal roasting. I think this young man is patient and steady. He's a good seedling," old Hunter said straightforwardly. David's face was a little unhappy. His voice also became a little feminine. "I think he's trying to delay the time." If he exceeds the time limit, he'll be eliminated. It'll save the judges' comments. It'll be more dignified. At that moment, a strong barbecued meat aroma pierced through the messy aroma in the air and rushed toward the judges' table like a sharp arrow. It smells so good. The judges' eyes lit up at the same time. They stopped arguing and looked at Meg. The barbecued lamb chops aroma was so strong and unique. After it appeared, it suppressed all the other fragrances in the air. It was impossible to ignore. Nancy's beautiful eyes flashed with a hint of a smile. She looked at Meg's calm face and didn't feel proud of himself for attracting the judge's attention. Is this the smell of barbecued lamb? It's so strong and aggressive. Just by smelling the aroma, it's enough to make people drool. One of the judges praised. Barbecued lamb chop is one of my favorite dishes, but this is the first time I've seen a barbecued lamb chop. I've never seen such a strong aroma before. It should have a lot to do with the marinating method and seasoning. Maybe it's also related to the barbecuing method. Another judge said. This aroma is great. As soon as it appeared, it completely suppressed all the other fragrances. It's even more enticing than the barbecued lamb I've tasted before. Old Hunter was a little excited. He glanced at David and Julian proudly, as if he was the one who barbecued the lamb chop. Julian snorted softly and didn't say anything. David's face was a little unnatural, but he still said, "This barbecued lamb chop's aroma is indeed enticing, but the aroma alone isn't enough. You have to taste it to know how it tastes." Chapter 24:39. It's golden and shiny. It must be very crispy, right? I want to eat it. Although it's grilled on charcoal, the surface of the lamb chops still looks very clean. There's no ash or black smoke at all. Hades, YYDS. The judge's comments made the audience who were not present at the scene gradually excited. The camera zoomed in. On the grill, the golden brown lamb chops were sizzling with oil, and the aroma seemed to overflow from the screen. Compared to the reserved cooking methods of the other contestants, grilling over charcoal was more intuitive and more pleasing to the eye. At this time, the contestants who had finished their matches focused their attention on Meg. Angelina's beautiful eyes revealed a hint of surprise. The aroma of the grilled lamb chops was really special. It was much stronger than the ones she had grilled before. It was an intoxicating and mouth-watering aroma. At first, she thought that Meg used charcoal grilling to impress the audience, but now she began to wonder if it was this cooking method that gave the lamb chops a different taste. Based on the aroma alone, she had already determined that Hades was a strong contestant. At least, he wasn't a good-looking vase. Iman, who was closest to Meg's console, felt the most at this moment. The rich aroma of the grilled meat rushed to his face and the sizzling sound drilled into his ears. He even swallowed a few times uncontrollably. As the disciple of the head chef of Tucker Hotel, Iman believed that his culinary skills were the best ever since he joined the show. Although he regarded Angelina as his biggest rival for the championship, he didn't think that her culinary skills were better than his. It was just that the way she presented the dishes was more exquisite and beautiful. But at this moment, he had to admit that if his steamed yellow arowana and Hades's grilled lamb chops were done at the same time, the aroma of the yellow arowana would be completely suppressed. Of course, this was just the aroma. As for the taste, just like David said, he would only know after tasting it. At this time, the most nervous contestant was undoubtedly Denton, who was temporarily in fourth place. Denton originally thought that he was already in the top 4. After all, his agent had told him before the competition that the substitute contestants this time were just here to watch the show, so he didn't have to worry about them. But now, Hades's performance had made them take him seriously. There was a clear disagreement among the judges, which was a good thing. The points difference between the contestants wasn't that big. Hades was behind by 10 points, and this difference was enough to eliminate him. The heat was just right, and the lamb chops were in the best condition. Meg began to plate them. There were no fancy decorations. The 12 lamb chops were stacked on the long plate to form a small mountain of meat. A small handful of chopped green onions was sprinkled on top of it, and the dish was complete. "Referee, I'm done." Meg raised his hand. There were only 5 minutes left on the 2-hour countdown timer, which was almost used up. "This presentation is really casual," David said with a disdainful smile. "Don't tell me you want me to use lamb chop to make you look like a peacock spreading its tail. Isn't a mountain of meat also a classic plate presentation?" Old Hunter retorted. Today, he was going against Dave. David's expression was somewhat displeased, and he was about to retaliate. "I think this presentation complements his overall cooking style. It's simple to highlight the theme. Roast lamb chops are roast lamb chops. There's nothing fancy about it. Moreover, the lamb chops themselves are enough to move people's hearts." At this moment, Nancy slowly opened her mouth. David choked on the words that were about to come out of his mouth, but he swallowed them back. Instead, he smiled and said, "Miss Nancy is right. There's a spiritual aura in this plate arrangement. From afar, it looks like a golden mountain. A few green onions decorate it like fresh grass and trees. It's the finishing touch. It's admirable. Old dog." Old Hunter looked at David with disdain. He resisted the urge to ridicule him. Meg couldn't help but take a few more glances at Judge Davy. His reading comprehension skills were indeed superb. There were many ways to present the lamb chops, but Meg was too lazy to do it. So, he chose the simplest way, which was to stack the chops on a plate. There was no artistic conception. However, Miss Nancy suddenly stood on his side. It was a pleasant surprise. On the surface, the Chef King competition was a competition to test one's cooking skills. However, in essence, it was a popular variety show. It was to choose a chef for the McCarthy family. As the person in charge of the show, besides being a judge, Nancy also had a lot of power. She had more power than the director. After David, the other judges also took advantage of the situation and praised Meg's lamb chops. Only Julianne looked cold and didn't say a word. As the head chef of Tucker Hotel, he had his own dignity. What did a little girl know about cooking? The lamb chops were presented to the judges. They were slowly displayed in front of the judges on a conveyor belt. The golden lamb chops had just been taken off the grill. The sizzling sound was still there, and the aroma was irresistible. Nancy's Adam's apple bobbed, and her eyes were filled with anticipation. The few dishes she had tasted earlier could only be considered mediocre and could not be compared to the culinary skills of her family's head chef at all. The so-called exotic delicacies were also much worse than the ones she usually ate, so they were not rare. However, this lamb chops were different. Even her family's best barbecue chef couldn't make the barbecue meat emit such a tempting aroma. At the end of the exhibition, the staff used a plate to give each judge a lamb chops and presented them to the judges. The temperature of the lamb chops had dropped slightly. It was the best time to eat. Nancy elegantly picked up the knife and fork, cut a piece of lamb from the lamb chops, and put it into her mouth. She pursed her lips slightly, chewed gently, and tasted it carefully, maintaining her elegant and charming persona. However, in the next moment, she broke her facade. The crispy skin was wrapped in the tender and juicy lamb. Nancy took a gentle bite. Before she could react or resist, the rich juice and fat exploded in her mouth. The slightly spicy oil melted on the tip of her tongue, and instantly exploded her taste buds. Ah! Nancy's lips opened slightly, and she let out a seductive moan. Yes, even though she had tasted countless delicacies and had grown up with exotic delicacies, Nancy still couldn't resist this aggressive lamb chops. Nancy realized that she had lost control. Her face was slightly red, but her eyes still couldn't leave the lamb chops in front of her. The knife and fork in her hand cut another piece of lamb and put it into her mouth. The long-lost surprise of food made her a little excited. Although her rich life since childhood made her lose interest in most food, it was precisely because of this that she wanted to find different flavors. That was why there was the variety show Chef King. This season's Chef King had disappointed her. He didn't let her find any new flavors. She didn't expect that a substitute contestant would give her a great surprise. Chapter 2440. Miss Nancy's exclamation was so delicious. Miss Nancy's exclamation was enough to secure Hades's victory. Miss Nancy was indifferent the entire time. I didn't expect her to lose her cool at the lamb chop. Look at her intoxicated expression. Is it really that delicious? The bullet screen was flooded with comments about Nancy losing her cool because of the lamb chop. It can't be. Is this newcomer really that good? The director had a strange expression. He looked at Nancy, who was engrossed in eating the lamb chop. He scribbled a few lines on the script and fell into deep thought. The other judges also started to taste the lamb chop. Old Hunter put on a pair of disposable gloves and grabbed the lamb chop that was as thick as a child's arm. He pinched the lamb chop with his fingers. The skin was slightly hard, but the meat was still soft. He took a bite. Under the crispy skin, the fat and tender lamb chop was oozing with oil. The slight spiciness had seeped into the meat, bringing along the fragrance of the fruitwood charcoal. The savory sauce gave the lamb a rich taste, and the fascia that clung to the bones gave the lamb a layered feeling of chewing. It was oily but not greasy. This lamb chop is amazing. Old Hunter's eyes widened, and his mouth was glistening with oil. He didn't wait to express his thoughts. He took another bite of the lamb chop and chewed carefully. His eyes were slightly closed, and he had an intoxicated expression. Is it really that good? David glanced at Old Hunter, then looked at Nancy, who had only taken a small bite before, but was now gorging herself. He cut a piece of lamb chop with his knife and put it into his mouth, suppressing his disgust at being roasted over a charcoal fire. Oh, once the lamb chop entered his mouth, David's eyes widened. The rich oil of the lamb exploded in his mouth, and the crispy skin was the perfect seasoning. With that bite, he saw the vigorous flocks of sheep running wildly on the grassland. Those were the elves of the grassland. He saw the fiery red charcoal fire and the fragrance of fruit trees quietly blooming in the burning. He saw the scene of his ancestors roasting food over the fire. Everything was like a dream, and it overturned his thoughts. This kind of deliciousness was explosive, making one unable to resist and unable to resist. As one of the top gourmet in the dungeon, he had tasted almost all the delicacies cooked by famous chefs. He had served as a judge for the 2 Chef King competitions. To be honest, most of the contestants had limited strength, and there was a gap between them and a real master chef. For example, Iman's steamed yellow dragon fish was far from Julian's. For the sake of the show's effect, he would say some pretty words. But this lamb chop was like a sudden clap of thunder, occupying a space in his heart. Yes, to him, this was undoubtedly a delicacy worthy of being amazed. It was a dish that could be ranked on the same level as the specialties of top-notch masters. I think I might have been wrong before. I was so wrong. David raised his head with tears in his eyes and took another bite. It's so delicious. The judges were so engrossed in the roast lamb chop that they forgot to comment. This kind of situation had never happened in the Chef King competition. Even if I, David, starve to death today, I will not eat a single bite of the charcoal grilled lamb chop. It smells so good. A large-scale face-slapping scene. I'm so hungry. Is there a restaurant in Tucker City that serves grilled lamb chops? There might not be one today, but there will definitely be one tomorrow. The audience in front of the screen were about to cry. In the Twin Towers building, a collie was sitting on the sofa swallowing her saliva as she ordered the secretary beside her. Didn't Big Brother Hades grill 12 lamb chops just now? They ate 10, so there are still 2 left. Go and get them for me. Young miss, this. The little Miss Secretary had an awkward look. This is the McCarthy family's show after all, and it is young Miss Nancy who is in charge of it. I'm afraid we can't say hello. If you can't say hello, then go and steal it. The Mocha building isn't the Twin Towers building. A collie said in a natural voice. We have confidence in breaking into the Mocha building, but this is a live broadcast with over 1 billion people watching, so it might not have a good effect. The secretary carefully reminded her. Her forehead was already covered in sweat. She didn't dare imagine how angry the old master would be if this really happened. A collie looked at her and seriously considered it before saying, "Forget it, I'll just send a message to Nancy. She should give me some face." That couldn't be better. The secretary said with a flattering look, but she was secretly complaining in her heart. It would be strange if young Miss Nancy gave you face. Seeing that everyone was praising the roast lamb chop, Julian also cut a piece of lamb for himself. The sharp knife cut through the lamb and oil and juice could be seen with the naked eye. The glowing meat increased one's appetite. It was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. It was without a doubt the best condition for roasted lamb. Hades was using the most primitive charcoal oven, so he didn't have precise temperature control. It was hard to control the temperature, but he had grasped the most suitable heat, which was very hard to come by. When the lamb was put into his mouth, the crispy skin wrapped around the tender lamb meat and the charcoal fragrance mixed in. It was very unique and distinct. It was something that no other method of roasting could achieve. Based on the state of the lamb meat, Hades' control of the heat was perfect. Roasting it a bit more would make it too hot and roasting it a bit less would make it too greasy. It was simply perfect. Precise kitchen utensils provided a lot of convenience for chefs and also greatly reduced the threshold for chefs. For example, the most difficult part of controlling the heat could be solved completely by timing. Even the seasoning spoon came with its own weighing device. When he was learning to cook, his master had specially given him a set of old-fashioned kitchen utensils and removed all the automatic parts. It was so that he could master cooking by himself instead of relying on the fully automatic utensils. Hundreds of years had passed, and he had become the head chef of Tucker Hotel. Except for the occasional guest, he was rarely busy in the kitchen. Nowadays, chefs could rely on precise kitchen utensils to steadily cook his signature dishes. Ordinary guests couldn't tell the difference. Iman was undoubtedly the best among them, and he was the disciple he was most proud of. However, the lamb chops in front of him made him fall into memories. Those days when he was reprimanded by his strict master, those days when he sweated profusely in the simple kitchen, those days when he was overjoyed because of the slight improvement in his cooking skills. He seemed to have forgotten all the things he had once stood by. When he swallowed the lamb, a warm stream slid down his throat and ignited his heart. It had been many years. His cooking skills hadn't improved for many years, right? Did his attitude of being content with the status quo destroy him in the end? This was really bad. Julian put down his knife and fork, put on a pair of gloves, and picked up the lamb chops to gnaw on. Eating meat in big bites was the correct way to eat lamb chops. Chapter 24:41. Old Hunter was the first one to finish his mutton chop. He put down the bone, took off his gloves, and wiped the sweat from his forehead and the grease from his mouth. His expression showed that he still hadn't had his fill. "This is the best lamb chop I've ever had in my life. It can even be said that it's the best barbecued meat." Old Hunter looked at Mag with admiration as he said, "Contestant Hades, you're much more powerful than I expected." "Thank you." Meg smiled humbly. David followed closely behind and finished his lamb chop. He looked at Nancy, who was still eating elegantly. She only took a small bite of each of the previous 7 dishes. Obviously, she was very satisfied with this one. "First of all, I would like to apologize to Hades for my carelessness and recklessness. After tasting it, it's clear that he has found a wonderful balance between food safety and deliciousness. He used an ancient cooking method to show us the true essence of food. The most sophisticated cooking tools can't necessarily bring out the most delicious food. The charm of an experienced chef is even more admirable." Just as Old Hunter said, "This is the best lamb chop I've ever had. Whether it's the heat or the seasoning, it's amazing. I can foresee that this dish will lead the barbecue trend to a certain extent and bring new ideas to the barbecue industry." David looked at the camera and gave his evaluation. The judges couldn't help but look at David in surprise. Although the lamb chop was delicious, with David's personality, there was no way he would admit his mistake in public and even apologize to the contestant. This kind of thing was really strange. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly, but he still nodded with a smile. It's rare to hear such a high evaluation from David, and he even apologized first. "Let me ask you one more time. Can you eat the same kind of lamb chop in Tucker City? If you can, I'll go now. I feel like Brother Justice has a chance to make a comeback today." According to the rules of the program, if Hades wants to advance, he has to get 96 points from the judges. Only then can he advance to the semi-finals by a small margin. Netizens' comments flooded the screen. Meg had actually done some calculations in his mind. According to the real-time PK value that she had transmitted to him earlier, he indeed needed to obtain at least 96 points from the judges to beat the current 4th place. Although he had gathered a lot of traffic today, it had only been a morning. So far, his online PK value had only been converted to about 3 points. Of course, this was far better than the 0 he had expected. Dan Dunn, who was ranked 4th, had a total score of 88.5. From the looks of it, the situation wasn't too bad on the surface. Dan Dunn could no longer sit still. He kept looking in the direction of his manager. Although he knew that Meg's online rating was extremely low, he didn't know if the judge's high evaluation of Hades would bring about any changes. The contestants who hadn't paid much attention to Meg couldn't help but pay more attention to Meg. After David finished his comments, Nancy put down her knife and fork. The whole lamb chop was eaten clean by her knife and fork, leaving only a few fascia clinging to the bone. The other judges saw this and were not in a hurry to express their opinions. They looked at Nancy. In the end, Nancy had the final say in this program, including the list of the semi-finals. They had already received it before the competition. However, this contestant's performance was too amazing. Miss Nancy, who had never had a good appetite on the show, actually finished an entire lamb chop. Obviously, something unexpected had happened. David, who had always been the most cunning, didn't hesitate to praise her. This made them even more determined to wait for Nancy to make the final decision before commenting. Nancy elegantly wiped away some grease at the corner of her mouth and looked at Meg. She didn't hide her admiration at all. In fact, the contestants of this year's Chef King competition had disappointed her. None of their dishes had surprised her. She had even decided in advance that even the champion would not be allowed to enter the kitchen of McCarthy Manor. However, she changed her mind today. She was determined to have this man. Nancy had made up her mind to let Hades enter the kitchen of McCarthy Manor just because of this roasted lamb chop. He would be in charge of the barbecue dishes. Although it was impossible to eat roasted lamb chop every day, it was the ultimate delicacy that satisfied the taste buds, whether it was for a small gathering with friends or for occasional cravings. Moreover, it was difficult for other chefs to replicate it, which meant that it was irreplaceable. This is the first dish I finished in this year's Chef King competition. Nancy looked at Meg and smiled. Hades used an ordinary black sheep to cook an amazing and intoxicating dish. Before this, I really didn't think that lamb could be so tender and succulent, so delicious and charming. He used this method to let us see the charm of traditional roasted lamb. He also proved on the stage of the Chef King competition that not only high-grade and precious ingredients can cook delicious food. I admire you very much. The last sentence was said to Meg alone. Thank you. Meg was still indifferent. He smiled and nodded. The judges looked at each other and revealed an expression that said, I understand now. The last contestant who received such praise and appreciation from Miss Nancy was the champion of the second Chef King competition. Now, he should be the chief chef of McCarthy Manor. Therefore, the judges took turns to flatter Meg. They were not stingy with their praise at all. Is this lamb chop really so delicious? Johnny was surprised. The script was all messed up, but Miss Nancy was the one who took the lead to change the script. He didn't dare to be unhappy. He frowned and changed the script while saying to the assistant beside him, Aren't there 2 lamb chop left? Go get it for me to try. Okay. The assistant walked away quickly. This was one of the benefits of the director team. The remaining food tasted by the judges was handled by them in a pollution-free way. Pack the remaining 2 lamb chop for me. I want to take it back. At this moment, Nancy's voice sounded in his ear. Johnny's expression froze slightly, but he quickly nodded. Director. The assistant quickly came with a plate and presented the 2 lamb chop. Johnny looked at the lamb chop and his throat moved. He tried to look away and said, Pack it according to the highest specifications and put it in the incubator. Aren't you going to try it now? The assistant was a little confused. I want to try it, but I'm not allowed to. Johnny felt bitter and said with a straight face, How can you not do your job during working hours? Take it away. Chapter 2442. Nancy's appreciation made Meg calm down a little. He even began to think about the possibility of joining the McCarthy family through Nancy, even if he didn't win the championship. Winning the championship wasn't his goal. After all, his goal was to join the McCarthy family and complete the follow-up mission. Taking Nancy's path was obviously the safest choice. Of course, if he could become the champion of the Chef King competition, he would be considered as the Earth's best food in the underground city. The judges had finished their comments. Only Julian, who had just put down the barren lamb ribs, was left. The camera naturally cut to him. Imon looked at his master with concern. His master had always been strict. Even though he had learned cooking from his master since he was a child, he had only heard a few praises. Dan Dunn's face was a little pale at the moment. He seemed to see the semi-final place in his hands flying away. This lamb ribs does have a unique flavor. Whether it's the aroma of the fruit charcoal in the roast lamb, or the slightly charred exterior wrapped in the fat and tender interior, they all show the chef's design and thought for this dish. The cooking method seems simple, but it requires the chef to have a very high control of the fire. Although this is the basic skill of a chef, most chefs' ability in this area has been wiped out by too many delicate kitchenware. "I think this roast lamb ribs is the best dish today," Julian said frankly. All of the judges looked at Julian in surprise. The nickname Iron-Faced Julian wasn't given to him for nothing. Julian didn't hold back when he ridiculed his own disciple, but he actually gave Hades, who he didn't think highly of in the beginning, such a high evaluation. "I agree with that," Old Hunter nodded. Old Hunter nodded. Nowadays, many chefs have forgotten what cooking is all about. Most of them have become tools controlled by recipes and kitchen utensils. Hearing that, the contestants on the stage all lowered their eyes to avoid the judge's eyes. He actually gave such a high evaluation. Iman was shocked. He had never heard such a compliment in the past 10 years. Even in the past 3 chefs' competitions, he had never heard such a compliment from his master. "It's over. It's really over," Dan Dunn murmured with a pale face. Even the strictest Julian had given such a high evaluation. It was very likely that Hades would get more than 90 points from the judges. That's all. Now, let's invite the judges to give their scores to Hades's dish. The host's voice sounded. The judges stopped discussing and began to give their scores with solemn expressions. So nervous. Will Brother Hades be able to turn the tables? Although he has received unanimous praise, Hades's chances of advancing to the next round are still slim. No one has scored more than 95 points in this year's Chef King competition. He has to get 96 points to advance. It's already unfair enough for the other contestants to be parachuted in. It's only right for them to be eliminated. The audience in front of their screens were also quite nervous. "I really am conflicted. If I want little big brother Hades to be eliminated, he'll be mine, but I also want him to advance. I don't want to see his sad appearance after being eliminated. What should I do?" On the top floor of the Twin Towers, a collie was biting the lamb chop in her hand with a conflicted look on her face. During the recording of the show, she couldn't get through to Nancy. The lamb chop was not from the show, but a substitute that the secretary had found for her at the last minute. It was the best roast lamb chop in Tucker City. The taste of the lamb chop in her hand wasn't bad, but she still wanted the one Hades roasted. She could tell that Nancy had taken an interest in Hades, which was why she said those shameless words. The Chef King competition, to put it bluntly, was the McCarthy Manor's chef selection competition. This was something that everyone in the chef's circle was well aware of. Because of this, the chefs were even more eager to participate in the competition, hoping to join the McCarthy family. Being chosen by one of the 10 great families meant that they wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing, as well as having a high status. Of course, she had everything Nancy had, and she had even more. A collie sent Meg a private message in the background before continuing to watch the show. A minute of scoring passed in the blink of an eye. The judges put down the scoreboard in their hands and waited for the results. Then, the program team sneakily inserted a live broadcast advertisement. Hades's score was about to be revealed, deciding if he could make a comeback and advance to the top 4. This was the peak of the show's viewership, with 130 million people watching the broadcast. So Johnson made a deal with the boss of a company, offering $100 million for a 20-second commercial. Meg called this profiteer in his heart, but he couldn't help feeling a bit nervous. This feeling was the same as when he didn't know that his family was rich, silently waiting for the college entrance exam results to come out. After a long 20 seconds, Meg's score was revealed in the comments that filled the screen. Judges' total score, 96. Overall score, 89. 4. Ranking, 3. Meg looked at the score on the screen and finally revealed a relaxed smile. It was a bit better than expected, but it was also a bit more dangerous than expected. The fourth place had a score of 88. If it wasn't for his actions before the competition, giving him a large amount of traffic, without the 3 PK points, he would have already been eliminated. This. How is this possible? Denton had a look of despair. From the additions to the top 8, he had never seen a contestant get a score of 96. This guy, on the other hand, got such a terrifying score in his first competition. So strong. Angelina looked at Meg, her beautiful eyes full of splendor. Although she was in first place, she only got 93 points from the judges. She was a little proud that she had set the record for the highest judges' score in this year's competition. She didn't expect that Meg would break the record in the blink of an eye and raise it to 96 points. This guy is a monster. Iman looked at Meg with a dignified expression. 96 points meant that at least 6 judges gave Meg full marks, which meant that they were very satisfied with the dish. Meg's PK points were only 3 points, but he was still in third place. His overall score was only 0. 6 points lower than Iman's. But what was more frightening was that he had just announced his participation in the competition this morning. When everyone thought that his PK points should be 0, he actually had 3 points. Congratulations to Hades for advancing to the top 4. W. He got 96 points. He is the second highest judge in the history of the Chef King competition. He is the highest judge in this competition. This contestant who came to the rescue is too strong, isn't he? It feels so good to make a comeback. I'm a fan. The audience was also restless. Chapter 24:43. So, what am I nervous about? Below the stage, she loosened her fists with a smile on her lips. But is this all part of his plan? Since the post this morning. She looked at Meg with curiosity in her eyes. Meg did not show any signs of discomfort when she came to the buried city. He made all kinds of arrangements with ease, and his constant trickery gave her the illusion that she was a fake buried city resident. His extraordinary performance in the professional field had successfully convinced the judges to give him a rare high score and advance to the semi-finals. For the mission, he had taken a step forward. The semi-finals were out. First place was Angelina with 92 points, second place was Iman, and third place was Meg with a slight lead of 0.4 points. The other 4 contestants were eliminated. Referee, I have a question. Denton stood up with grief and indignation. Everyone looked at him with pity in their eyes. According to the original script, he should have successfully advanced to the top 4 by now, instead of being pitifully swept into the elimination list like he was now. The referee looked in the director's direction. Johnny nodded slightly, indicating that he could make his statement. Contestant Johnny, do you have any questions? The referee looked at him and asked. Johnny pointed at Meg and said, Hades just joined the King of Chefs competition this morning and his basic PK value is 0. It's only been a few hours, so how did his online score reach 3 points? That's impossible. The other contestants had similar expressions as they looked at the referee and judges. This is indeed strange. Dave nodded. As a veteran judge for 3 years, he knew that Hades's PK value had exceeded 30 million by the time he reached the quarterfinals. Although this score was far lower than the average score of the contestants, it was already beyond the normal threshold for a contestant who had just joined the competition less than 5 hours ago. In the face of the contestants' and judges' doubts, the referee calmly raised his hand and said, Director, please switch to the real-time PK list. A list of the semi-finals appeared on the big screen. Angelina was at the top of the list with 150 million points, followed by Iman with 130 million points, and Hades with 35 million PK value was at the bottom of the list. 35 million, and the number was still rising at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, the score calculation formula appeared on the screen. According to the formula, Meg's current online score was 3-1, an increase of 0-1 from the previous score. What did this guy do? This was the most shocking thought in the minds of the judges and contestants. Are you kidding? Hades is Brother Justice with over 100 million fans on the internet. I understand. After all, the contestants and judges have been offline for 2 hours. They don't know that times have changed. If you and I don't vote, when will Brother Justice reach the top? Brother, go and vote for me. The netizens were overjoyed. Denton almost lost. Are you crazy? This is the live broadcast of the King of Chefs competition. Even if I not. But at this moment, his manager's slightly trembling voice exploded in his ears, instantly waking him up. The rest of his words were stuck in his mouth, and he didn't dare to say them out loud. This is unbelievable. I'm convinced. Congratulations, Hades. Denton tried to control his emotions and squeezed out a smile at Meg. Thank you. Meg looked at Denton's smile, which was uglier than a crying face, and found it funny. The smile on his face became even brighter. After the contestants' doubts were resolved, the program team kindly gave the eliminated contestants time to bid farewell to the stage. Although this was a cooking competition, because of the many halos and popularity, the contestants themselves already had the attributes of celebrities. In the past, most of the top 8 contestants would sign a contract with Mocha Group's management company and debut according to their attributes. The eliminated contestants bid farewell to the stage, and the qualified contestants successfully took their seats. While the judges congratulated them on their success, they also announced that the semi-finals would be held tomorrow. The rules of the competition would be announced on the spot tomorrow. At this point, the 2.5-hour semi-finals of the King of Chefs competition came to an end. The live broadcast is over. Thank you all for your hard work, said Johnny as he took off his headphones and stood up. The cameras were all turned off, and the judges also got up one after another to move their stiff bodies that had been sitting for more than 2 hours. The contestants got off the stage and were taken away by their respective managers. Did you help me gain fans? Meg followed she down the long corridor and asked through telepathy. No. She shook her head. Isn't 30 million a little too much? Meg still found it hard to believe. The incident this morning is still brewing. At the same time, the King of Chefs competition also gave us a huge boost in popularity, explained she. Has Horace been arrested? Meg stopped smiling and asked. Charlie and Bart have been arrested by the investigation department, but Horace hasn't been arrested yet. Given how ruthless Fergus is, it's questionable whether Horace is still alive or not. Meg shook his head and pondered for a moment before saying, Give me Horace's location. I know you can get it. What do you want to do? She stopped and looked at him with deep eyes. As I said, justice may be late, but it will never be absent. Meg smiled. This kind of thing should be left to the investigation department. What you're doing is not in line with the rules of Buried City. She shook her head. Killing him to silence him is in accordance with the rules of the dungeon. Meg's smile had a hint of mockery. That's right. They were the ones who set the rules in the first place. She kept quiet and continued walking. He should be put on trial to atone for those girls who died unjustly and were still trapped in their nightmares. He shouldn't die quietly and be disguised as a suicide, Mag said as he looked at She's back. She took a deep breath and looked back at him. According to the rules of the show, contestants are not allowed to leave Mocha Building during the competition without permission. So, you have to leave your bracelet in the building. You only have 2 hours. I think you're getting cuter. Meg smiled brightly and followed her. 10 minutes later, she drove the flying car out of Tucker Building. Women's clothing is a little awkward, but the dress is pretty cool. Meg took off the balaclava and unbuttoned the tight-fitting dress. There was a red dot on the screen that was located in a mountain valley 3,000 kilometers west of Tucker City. It was currently parked. This should be Horace's location. Let's go and meet this scumbag. Meg turned on the autopilot and started to change. End of chapter. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.